I've been into hiking and camping for as long as I can remember. I was an Eagle Scout, then after that, I convinced a few high school and then
Oh, sweet.
college friends to come along on a few trips with me. My passion for the outdoors stayed strong long after graduation, but as all of my old hiking buddies started dropping out of the hobby, it got harder and harder to put a trip together. In the end, it seemed like if I wanted to go hiking as regularly as I wanted to, I was going to have to start going solo. Solo hiking seemed kind of lame at first. I mean, what good are all these experiences if you can't share them with someone? Hardship and struggle forge very strong bonds between people, and that was half the joy of it. Each trip would bring another set of adventures and memories. I'm talking real experiences too, not just getting drunk and sharing funny vines with each other. But as it turns out, solo hiking is actually pretty fun. Suddenly, I wasn't constrained by what anybody else wanted to do, where they wanted to go, or when a trip could take place. I could just think it up and do it. Clock out of work on a Friday afternoon and then spend the whole weekend in the woods before being back in bed on Sunday night. Don't mind if I do. Take off for a whole week to hike a section of the Great Appalachian? Why not? The only real issue with going solo is safety. I grew to envy my European counterparts, especially those in the United Kingdom. They can head out alone with nothing but a fully charged phone, a spot of tea, and a few crumpets, you know? Whereas here in the United States, you need bear mace, a GPS system, sometimes a gun if you want to feel really safe and secure. I'm not saying I was terrified every time I went anywhere, but you hear enough stories to know it's better to be caught packing than caught lacking. I only brought a gun with me once I was up in the Sierras, and that was for the bears and big cats, but much like
Hello,
anywhere
Tacham.
else a person might go, it's not really the wildlife that you need to be afraid of. It's the people. Like I mentioned, you hear some really crazy stories, and I heard a lot of them. right up until I stumbled into my very own cautionary tale, one that started with me meeting a girl. So, this one weekend, I decided to take a trip over to Hammersley Wild area, which is like a designated wilderness spot sandwiched between Elk and Susquehannock State Parks. As the name suggests, it's one of the wilder, more secluded areas of natural beauty in the state of Pennsylvania. You gotta drive out to this little place called Crossed Forks, and then turn down a little side road until the blacktop ends and the trail begins. There's one or two small houses out there, but they don't mind you parking there so long as you don't leave a mess. And the place is so off the beaten path that there's hardly anyone else there to worry about messing with your ride. But then I woke up
The
late Friday
weekend.
afternoon and there's another car there,
It's not
with a
weekend
girl
yet.
leaning up against it. She's
It's
cute,
not weekend yet.
dressed in
But
hiking gear, but she looks angry.
soon, right?
Not exactly furious or anything, but super annoyed at something. I parked
You
a
have
distance
plans for
from
the
her,
weekend,
not wanting to
Tasha?
crowd her or draw any anger or anything like that, and then got out and started pulling my gear out of my trunk. I didn't want to be a creep and start any unwanted conversation or anything, so I just resigned myself to walking past her and minding my own business. But as I started on my walk, we made a little awkward eye contact and we kind of fell into conversation. We swapped haze, and I asked her if she was okay, and she replied no. And well, that was that. It turns out that she had a friend stand her up for a hike that she'd been really looking forward to, and wasn't looking forward to driving all the way back home with nothing to show for it. She was debating going up the trail alone, but also wanted to see if she could convince her friend to come out anyways, as she was well aware that hiking alone as a female was not the brightest of ideas. I told myself it was the polite thing to do, but I also knew that inviting her to hike with me was a great way of getting to know a very pretty girl that clearly shared a passion for the outdoors. So I
Very
did just
pretty
that,
girl.
and asked her if she wanted to come join me.
It's afternoon
It was this
Friday.
definite
Usually
moment of
I'm on a
hesitation
little
for her.
dose of
She didn't
KFC.
look like the
What?
kind of girl to just go walking down
Do
some
you
remote
eat
forest
crazy
trail with
amount
a
of
complete stranger,
KFCs on
and for a second
Friday?
there,
Is that
I
what you're
figured that she
trying
was
to
going to
tell me?
politely decline me.
No free
But then
weekend
there was
like
a sort of
always?
flash of
Are you
spontaneity in her
busy?
eye
Is it
before
because of
she looks
work?
at me with a big smile and said, "Sure." She told me her name was Allie, and as we walked, I explained that I was planning on making camp somewhere to stay for the weekend, but that I'd be happy to walk her back to her car once she was ready to leave. She thanked me, said that I was sweet for offering, and then carried on breaking the ice and swapping small talk. Then, once we got more comfortable with one another, I can safely say that it made for one of the best first dates that I'd ever been on. It definitely had this kind of vibe to
First
it.
days
I'm
on
no
hiking
Disney
trip.
prince or anything like that, but I'm not terrible to look at. And I know when a girl is flirting with me and not just being polite or nice or whatever.
I mean, I'm
So
always
as we
free.
walked and talked, I started getting pretty excited about where this might lead.
You're always
It
free,
had been a
huh?
while since I tried any dating, and
I
my
do eat
brief
way too
time
much
of jumping
KFC
on
back
Tinder
then.
had
Back
been a total
when? Are you
disaster.
saying you no longer
I
eat that
always
much
found that it
KFC
was
now,
much more
or
appealing to meet
what?
a person
What
naturally,
is it?
rather than to use the internet to sort of force it.
Back then?
But as I'm
Back
sure
when?
many of you will agree, that's much easier said than done. Given how it was a mutual
Why
interest,
do you eat
we
so
talked
much
a lot about
KFC?
hiking at first, places we'd been, close calls that we've had, and stuff like that. But as time went on, we started talking about other things too, like our jobs, our families, and relationships. She told me that she'd been single for a while, but she wasn't looking for anything at that moment. But she was also quick to add that if the right thing came along, that she'd been open to changing her mind about the whole not looking thing.
Oh, that lady is
It
kind
seemed
of
like a loaded
sucks.
statement, but it was a very welcome one, and as we continued to walk, I wondered if that chance meeting with her was the start of some lifelong romance. Now looking back on it, I actually cringe at how naive that sounds, but I guess loneliness is a hell of a thing. Maybe about an hour into our
Loneliness, huh?
hike, we were walking along the edge of the stream when Allie stopped to take a picture. She then asked me to give her a second while she texted her friend, saying that she didn't have enough signal for a call, but could probably force a text through. To me, it was a very familiar little dance. Hammersley is pretty close to a town, but thanks to all the hills surrounding us, cell signal was kind of hard to come by. While she was texting, I wandered back stream a little bit, just waiting for Allie to finish up doing her thing, when something caught my eye maybe 50 or 60 yards downstream. A flash of movement in the trees, only very slightly, but I 100% saw something for sure.
When not in
I
the
walked back to
mountain, I
Allie
get
to ask
access
if she
to
had any
fast
bear
food.
spray or anything
I
on
moo
her, but
moo.
when
What?
she said yes, I wasn't completely
I
reassured.
can't eat
It
anymore
was
cause
nice
no
that we'd both be
cell.
able to defend ourselves in the
I
event of an
see.
animal attack,
So
but at
while
the
you
same
were not
time,
in the
I didn't
mountains,
want anything to ruin our
you
hike, especially
ate
if
like
anything
crazy
happened
because you
again
don't
and
get to
bears
eat them
showed.
anymore, huh?
I told her I thought that I might have spotted something downstream. She said that she'd keep her eyes peeled, and then we went off on our way as
You poor
usual.
thing.
Maybe an hour later, half hour later, we came out of the trees and onto a wide open meadow that sloped slightly upwards. When we got to the top, or rather where the gentle slope turned into a steep hill, we stopped and turned around to take in the view. Nothing had followed us out into the meadow, so I figured that we were okay on the wild animal front. But just to be safe, I decided to pull out this little monocular, or spyglass for you pirate fans, that I was carrying with me to check out the tree line below us. I scan, and I don't see anything, but then I scan it a second time, and I see a dark figure moving parallel to the tree line. I can't really make out any details because of the difference in the light, but there was definitely something there. And right when I thought that they might just be some fellow innocent hiker that I was making the object of my own paranoia, the figure stopped, turned their profile,
Caveman
and just
language
stood
useful
still.
sometimes? What?
At first, I thought they might have been taking a leak or
What are
something,
you
but then it hit
talking
me.
about?
They were watching us.
You talk about
I
the
immediately
fact
directed
that
Allie's
you
attention
said
to the
moo moo.
figure, pointing out where I'd been looking
What?
before handing her the spyglass.
Any
She
weekend
put it
plan
to her
also
eye,
emote
listened
drawing? No,
again
no,
as I
not
gave her
emotes,
directions
but
where to look, but then gave me
something
some
else.
skeptical reply when I
Weekend
asked her
plan.
if she could see anything. She asked me if I was 100%
There's
sure that the
a
person had been watching us.
there's a stream
And to be
tomorrow
fair, I didn't know for
that I
certain.
don't know
I
what
just
I'm
had a
going to
bad feeling
stream,
based
but
off
there's
the
a
previous
stream
little
planned
flash of movement in the
tomorrow,
trees back near the stream.
and
I tried again to get her to look in the
Sunday
right
is
spot, then politely
movie
took
watch
the
along.
spyglass back from her
So
to
yeah,
look for myself. And when I did,
Sunday is also
I
the
saw
day
that
that
there
I
was
have
no
to
one
apply
there.
for a job.
Or
So
at least there
so
was
yeah,
no one in the spot that I had been originally
it's
looking.
2 p.m. You think my brain
I
works?
scanned the tree line for a third time in almost as many
Yes,
minutes, and that
it's
time
2
there was
p.m.
nothing there. But I still felt very
It's
uneasy
not
and suggested
early
that we just
morning or late
move on.
night. Your brain never
Our
works.
original plan had been to hike around the base of the hill that we come to, then head back down the same trail to where Allie's car was parked. But because of how uneasy I felt, I suggested that we walk a longer route so we wouldn't have to double back on ourselves.
Your brain just never
I could see
works.
that Allie was starting to get a little suspicious of my intentions. There she was, having to agree to go on a short hike with some stranger, probably out of sheer politeness, and there I was, trying to talk her into further going into the wilderness with talk of some shadowy pursuers. She seemed skeptical, but she agreed, most likely knowing that she could turn the bear mace on me if I started to get a little fresh, which I wasn't. After walking another mile or so, the tension had started to clear up, though. No one was following us anymore, at least they didn't appear to be, and I was starting to think that I was just being overly paranoid, like it was the nerves of trying to shoot my shot bleeding over into something else, you know? And speaking of which, that's pretty much all I was focused on from there on out. Allie kept reassuring me, making lighthearted comments about me being desperate for an excuse to
Both
save
of you
her.
to think
So I
it
found
working at
myself getting
all.
more and more chill
Wow,
and forgetting
wow,
what I assumed was
wow.
just a coincidence. Not long
A job
after walking
application
back into the
soon gonna
forest,
be
we
probably
headed out what
not
we call
fun.
the Babbling Brook.
Think about
I've
the
first heard
amount
that
of
term
merch and
while in this video
yeah,
that I
yeah.
saw
Think
on
about
YouTube.
things I can
This
buy,
place
right?
is one of the larger streams, looking like
Job?
something
Yeah,
man
job.
himself would have painted.
I'm just
People
gonna
sometimes
get
get
a
Pennsylvania a
part-time
hard
job
time given how
that's
industrialized parts of it are,
really
but
near
there's
my
plenty of
house
natural beauty
because
to be
they're
had there,
hiring.
and in sharing it with my potential
And
date,
like
I
the
was hoping to
convenience
up
store
my
near my house
chances
is
a little.
hiring.
Allie seemed
So I'm
delighted
most
with it
probably
and
just gonna apply to
started
that,
snapping
and
pictures while
hopefully
I
I get a
paced
job.
around with a smug smile on my
And I
face.
just have to walk
She
5
liked the place
minutes
so much, she
to
wanted to
work,
hang out there for a while to take a breather and eat some snacks, and while
and
we
then 5
did,
minutes to come
she was
home.
planning on texting her friend the pictures, signal permitting, to show her what she was missing out on. While Allie was keeping busy trying to text, I excused myself to just go take a leak somewhere private, and then headed off into the trees to find somewhere secluded. I find a spot, do my thing, then, just as I'm turning around to head back, I hear something in the trees behind me. I'm instantly reminded
Can buy
of that
groceries and snacks
sensation
after
of
work too.
being followed.
Exactly.
Only this time, I
Exactly.
actually make an effort to find out if
Like,
there's anything,
that would be
any
the
woman
best
who's
possible
trailing us.
thing so
I started
far
walking directly towards
for
where
a
I
job,
heard the noise,
like a part-time
calling out
job.
and asking if
Just
there was
5
anyone
minutes
there,
away.
and that's when I see him. This big guy, wearing hiking gear, and was walking away from me at a pace. I found the hiking gear kind of reassuring in a way, like I could give him the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, I was now confronted with evidence that we were being followed. Hammersley is a big
Being
place.
followed.
Sure, it gets kind of busy on a weekend, but not on a Friday afternoon, which is half the reason I like to get a head start by arriving at that very time. The chances of just running into someone, especially off the trails, is slim to none, so as much as I wasn't straight up convinced that we were being followed, I still wanted to confront that guy to at least make sure. I called out to him, not in some overly aggressive way, just to get his attention, you know. I planned on asking him something fairly innocent like, "You okay?" or something like that, just to gauge his mood, but when he turned, I was stunned into silence. He was dressed like a hiker, all right, but he had these thick, heavy-looking gloves on, almost like those riot gloves that you see with the hard knuckles, and the lower half of his face was covered with a hunting gaiter, the kind where only the person's eyes are showing. Well, a face covering like that was totally normal during 2020 and 2021, and still kind of accepted today. You see, back in 2015, it was definitely not a regular thing to see, especially since the guy didn't have any kind of orange indicators on his clothing for hunting, or more importantly, no weapon that I could see.
Don't go all out on a snack
I was
if I had a
relieved
bad
to
day.
see no weapon in his hands,
I
but the fact that he was
think
covering
it
his face
should
meant he was
be
obviously
fine,
up to no good.
but
And then
at
there was the
that
fact that he
convenience
refused
store
to
they also
respond
sell
when I
like
finally did ask him if
$1
everything was okay.
potato chips,
He
so
just
I
gave me
think
this
I'll
sort
be
of death
okay.
stare for a second,
I
and
mean,
then turned again.
if
and
I
walked off
ever
into
do
the
buy
woods.
potato chips, it's just $1.
Now my mind is rushing like a mile a minute by this point. Following us down a single trail was one thing, but this dude had potentially tracked us across an open meadow, and then it just so happened to stay on our trail, even though we traversed the hill and picked up a seemingly random route. I'd like to think of myself as kind of an outdoorsman, but to me, those were some freakily accurate tracking skills. And if this guy was using his powers for evil, then that was going to be a big problem for us.
Using his powers
I
for
rushed back
evil.
to Allie, told her exactly what I'd seen, and told her that we needed to move.
Hello,
fast.
Karani.
I told her
Welcome.
that I knew it sounded crazy, and that I totally understood
You
why
too,
she'd
yes.
think that I was a creep or
Adorable
whatever,
too,
but
right?
I'd rather she think that I was a
She
creep and
give
a
me
not than anything risk
you
both
know,
of our lives.
$1
So
snacks.
much horrifying
If I
stuff seems
send
to
them
happen
to
because
you,
people
it's
always
no
talk
longer
and just tell
$1.
themselves,
So
this isn't normal or
easy,
safe.
Tachan. Just
We
come
need to leave.
over and
And I
buy.
was having one of
I'm
those
pretty
moments
sure
like that.
$1 my
I
country
gave my
money
little
to your
speech,
country
that
money
calming
is
down
not cheap
speed,
at
you know,
all.
and I honestly thought that I'd convinced her for a second. But when I was done, and I started walking off while beckoning her to follow me,
Yeah, that
she just
that
stayed
looks
put.
accurate
I
enough. Yes.
remember saying, "We need to leave, Allie, now." But instead of following me, she gave me a mouthful. She told me I was acting like a total jerk, and that if we were being followed, she'd have known something about it. She wasn't some defenseless little girl either, so she resented me acting like it, and according to her, just because someone happened to be on our trail didn't mean they were acting maliciously. They were all good points. And on any other occasion, I might have echoed them back to her, but I knew this was not any other occasion. Something was quite obviously shady with this weirdo, and we needed to exercise the proper
Cheaper,
caution
please.
and stack.
Buy them in your
It was
country.
about then that I started to notice this sort of gradual change in the way Allie was talking to me. It went from something like, "Come on, dude, you're being ridiculous," and urging me to stay, to accusing me of being a mixture of dumb, cowardly, and mentally ill. I wanted to walk her back to her car. She wanted to stay put and not even move on to someplace else downstream. And if I wanted to move or leave her, then I wasn't half the man I thought I was, among other personal attacks from her. I just remember being confused beyond belief. It honestly felt like a weird dream. It seemed like any girl in their right mind would at least be kind of alarmed at the prospect of being followed by a man wearing a mask. But here was Allie.
I can go to
Not
the
even in
convenience
least
store
bit
5
bothered,
minutes
suddenly
away. Yeah,
visibly
just buy
shaken
the
up as I
snacks
warned
at
her of potential danger.
your convenience store.
The only mitigating
More
factor in
animated
this
alert.
was this
Yeah,
idea
I'm
that she
trying
thought
to
it was
work
me
on
who was trying to trick her
something
into,
like
I
your
don't know,
character here,
going someplace more remote so I could go all Ted
that I
Bundy on
can
her without being
do
discovered.
for cheap.
That
Love the
I totally
glasses.
understood,
Thank you.
and I suspected that her reluctance was coming from there.
I'm glad you
And
do.
not being dumb or naive or untrusting
It's
enough to not
a
respond to my
different
warnings.
style of glasses
We were
compared to
both
ones I did
being pretty
before.
loud by that point, arguing back and forth, and it
You
hit me
only
that our
eat borrowed
volume
food?
would
No,
make
no,
it
no,
very
no, no.
easy for someone
Don't
to
lie,
quickly
Tachan.
zero
You
in
don't
on us
eat
and
borrowed
catch
food.
us unaware.
You only eat free
I
food.
remember looking around just
We
to
all
make sure
know
that we were
this.
still alone, and I felt that creeping, skin-crawling feeling that comes
You
with
fox.
knowing that you're actually being watched.
Toggle one.
I honestly
Toggle
thought
one
that if
will
I just started to
toggle
walk
the
off, that Allie would come to her senses
this.
somehow and follow. So that's what I did.
I don't have the page
I
open,
started
so I have to
walking
do it
off,
manually.
looking back just once to see if she was going to follow or not. She looked furious, though. I mean, really angry. And it was obviously because she wasn't going to get her way. But there was something else to it, too. She wasn't going to get her way, but what she intended wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing that she could
Oh my
carry on
God.
doing without me. It was something that she put a lot of
I
time
didn't
and effort
sketch
and
the
excitement
face
into.
shape up, and now I need
Something that was
to
so close to coming together,
decide on
was
the
falling
face.
apart at the
Yahoo!
last
Thank you
minute.
for following, Karani.
I guess with the gift of hindsight,
Hat, yes,
some of you
hat.
have figured out by now, but in that moment,
I don't know. I
what
already
was
had
actually
too
going
much
on was almost completely
depth.
inconceivable to
What
me.
is depth?
Almost, but not quite.
What do you mean
I
by
realized that two of the questions
DEPT?
in front of me had
Depth
answers that were intrinsically linked.
department?
The reason why the guy in the hunting gear could find us so easy was interwoven
Or do you
with the reason
mean
Allie wouldn't stay in the
DEBT?
exact spot near the
So
bend
you
in the
owe
road.
people money
The masked
or
stranger
something.
and my new hiking
Tachan
companion
is a
were
shopping
working
mall.
together. Now I know I couldn't have known that for certain in that
Tachan,
moment,
you're a
but
shopping
I'm not
mall?
sure I could even describe how quick and how painful my thought process
DBT.
was in that moment. But again, it was a case of
No,
get the
no,
hell
no.
out of there,
Tachan, you're a
move
shopping
on,
mall.
but live.
You're
Or
a whole
not trust
mall.
my gut and potentially run into something I wouldn't walk away from. And being the kind of person I am, I chose the path of least resistance. I started walking off, still in disbelief of how surreal it all was. It was a real, this cannot be happening right now kind of moment. Like, I
This
couldn't
cannot
believe
be
how things
happening.
had started off so well but gone so horribly wrong in just an hour or two. But I could at least still see the funny side, or kind of funny side. Maybe I was being a total jerk, and I was going to look back at that hike as being the time that I blew my shot over some weird attack of paranoia. Unfortunately, the funny side was only visible for a matter of seconds, as after that, any benefit of the doubt was blown away by an ear-splitting screech that came following me through the trees. You gotta understand,
Recreation
too,
into a
that
shopping
hearing
mall?
these 3 little words probably made for the single most terrifying moment
What?
in my entire life.
Into a shopping mall?
All I heard after a few seconds
I like
of
the
silence
people you draw show up behind your
Allie
model like an anime
screaming
flashback.
out,
Yes.
"He's
I'm
getting
blocking
away."
it almost
The
fully.
second that I heard that, I just instinctively ran. I don't know if it was finding out all that
It's a
so-called
link. It's a
paranoia
link
had been
because you
justified,
put the full
but I
stop
mean it
there,
when I say
Tachan.
that. When it all came together like that, I could feel my heart
Tachan is sending
pounding out of my
links.
chest.
Damn.
I had no idea where the guy was, if he was close or what he had in his pack. So I popped the clasp on my pack and wiggled it off my back, and then moved my legs faster than I'd ever moved them before, and I didn't stop
I need
until I felt like puking.
I need
always
to
wore,
get
like,
this
a
face
fishing
shape down, I
jacket, the
swear.
kind with a lot of pockets, and I kept all my absolute essentials in there, car keys included. If they'd have been in my pack, I'd have been forced to run with it, and if that was the case, I honestly don't know if I'd be around to write this. After I stopped for maybe a minute to catch my breath, I kept pushing through the trees back towards my truck, trying not to trip and fall on my face as I kept checking over my shoulder. I knew the guy wasn't some master tracker anymore. He'd obviously been coordinating with that so-called Allie, if that even was her real
That
name.
so-called
But I
alley.
still had that fear that I was going to look over my shoulder and he'd just be there. Thankfully, he wasn't, and I made it back to my truck, jumped in, and drove off. I kept telling myself that I'd call the cops the moment that I walked through the door, but when it came time to doing it, I found that it might have been a bad idea. I don't think any kind of crime had actually been committed, in which case, what exactly was I going to report? I hadn't even tried to retrieve my bag or anything, and if it was gone, the least I could
Imagine
report was it
doing a
stolen or
feat,
something.
your character here,
So
where
that's
all
what I
you
decided
gotta
to
do is draw stockings
I
and
waited a
paint
day to try and
nails.
ensure no one was using it for bait or whatever.
I
and
mean,
went out to retrieve it,
they
and
do
I found it untouched.
the
I'd
ties,
actually
right?
found myself hoping that
So
someone
I'm
had
sure
it,
there will be
but
people who
any
will
kind of blew it
commission
or tried to
for
damage it in
feet.
some
Yes,
way, as that might yield
yes,
some DNA
yes.
or maybe fingerprints, I guess.
Very small, very
But
round,
no,
such
my
bullyable
pack
shape.
was
You mean
just there,
yourself? Are you talking about
exactly where I
yourself?
dropped it, totally untouched. I had nothing to show for my experience, only my
You talking
word
about
and my
yourself?
memories. But as any attorney will tell you, those are about as useful to the cops as a chocolate coffee pot. There was nothing I could do. I had no recourse, nothing that wouldn't put my own safety at risk anyways. But then I realized that there was something I could do, even if it was just some insignificant internet post or email that gets ignored, downvoted, or buried, or whatever. Because if just one person reads this, who is thinking of hiking through Hammersley, and actually listens and takes note, then I might just save a life. Because if I'm right, and I wasn't just being completely and utterly paranoid, there's a couple out there who are setting traps for unwary male hikers, and I only avoided falling into it by the skin of my teeth.
You know, this first story is basically don't think with your
Almost 10
dick.
years ago now, my wife and I decided to go on a little hiking trip in
You don't
southern
even have a
Massachusetts,
single
specifically
triangle?
the Miles Standish State Forest. We checked out a
Triangle?
few options for cabin rental and found one that was within our budget, and then booked it for
Is
a
that
weekend.
supposed to be an
It was a beautiful
insult?
little place, not far from a heart-shaped pond
Triangle?
with ready access to all the
You
different
want me to
hiking
have a
trails
triangle?
dotted around the park. Our first day was wonderful. We had a picnic over near College Pond, followed by a basic campfire-style dinner back at our cabin. The daytime was beautiful, but the nighttime was intimidating to say the least.
I guess your fox ears is kind of a triangle,
all
huh?
over the forest, so it wasn't like we were in a particularly secluded place. But nighttime in the city is very different to nighttime in the woods, especially if you grew up and spent most of your life in the former. There's something very eerie about it, so much so that both me and my wife commented on it independently of one another. We weren't scared at all. We felt very safe out there, so the feeling was something of a novelty, I guess, and not something that robbed us of any sleep. The second day was similar to the first. We did some hiking, had another al fresco lunch, and then returned to the cabin in time for dinner. But instead of eating at the cabin, we went over to Mirbeau, just south of Plymouth, for a fancy 3-course dinner and a bottle of wine. We discussed taking a taxi to and from the Mirbeau
Do I need
complex,
it
but
separate? I
I
don't
decided
think
that I
so.
wanted to be fresh
Not
for
for
the next
this
morning,
one.
so I drove and my wife drank.
The head is
The wine went
triangle.
down a little
It's
too
a
hard,
head
and
shape.
by the time we got back to the cabin,
The head is
she was
kind
so
of
wasted
triangle,
that she
yeah.
dozed off the moment her head hit
Your
the pillow.
head, Tachan.
I didn't begrudge her the chance to
Put
tell
Tachan
me
on
about
your
it,
head.
but I thought it was funny.
Wear Tachan like a
It
hat.
turned out to be very fortunate that only one of us drank that night, and I'll tell you why. After my wife passed out and was snoring, very loudly I might add, I brushed my teeth, took a shower, and then climbed into bed. It was just before midnight at that time, and I set an alarm for 7:30 a.m. God knows how long later that I wake up to what I assume is my phone vibrating on the rustic wooden bedside table next to my head. I reached up to grab it, only to realize that it's not my phone making the noise. It's something else entirely. Something is softly scratching the wood at the other side of the cabin wall, almost right next to where I'd been laying my head. Now, while this was very creepy for a second or two, I'm a rational enough person to realize that a sound like that is most probably some kind of animal, and having done my research, I knew all we had to worry about were snakes and possibly foxes or coyotes. There tend not to be any bears or mountain lions in this area of Massachusetts, or rather, the chances of encountering the former, at least, are extremely remote. It was the reason we'd chosen the state forest in the first place, knowing it was
I
one of the
do
safer
need to
options for
separate the
hiking, so,
head.
like I said, hearing the sound was startling but not scary. At first, I tried to go back to sleep, hoping that whatever was making that scratching sound would just get bored and go away. I know a lot of animals scratch their claws or teeth against wood as a way of filing them down or sharpening them, so I thought that it was maybe something small and non-threatening doing exactly that. But then, the scratching started to move, and it sounded like it was coming from another section of wall, much higher up than before. I say much higher up. It was only maybe a foot or two higher, but in my head, whatever was making the sound went from, say, squirrel-sized to fox-sized.
I started doing the
Again,
layer art
this
for
was
Basti
fairly
Life 2D is
I
pain.
put my head up
But
against the pillow again,
when it
well,
moves
I wondered if I
though,
should do
when it
anything.
moves, we all love it
In
when
the
it
end,
moves.
I climbed out of bed, went
Don't
over to where I could
blame
hear
Net
the
Destroy
scratching,
after
and
what?
then banged on
You're
the wall
gonna
a few times
you're
to try
gonna
and
destroy
scare
the
it
net
off.
because
And sure enough,
Cress is
it
gonna
seemed to
wear
do the
you
trick.
as a hat.
And the sound of my fist against the wall didn't wake up my wife, so
How long
I climbed
all
back into
these
bed
animated
without saying a
alerts
word.
took you? I mean like
I swear I was
normal
right on the verge
time,
of
not
drifting back off
rush
when the
hour like
scratching sound
Dusty
started up
one.
again. I realized that if I wanted
You
to get
mean
anything resembling
planning
a good night's
the
sleep,
animated
I'd have to head
alerts?
outside with my flashlight
Cause
and
I
really
started
scare this thing
planning
off.
this morning.
So I climbed out of bed,
Boing
put on some clothes, and
boing.
headed out into the dark.
Can't
and
wait
light.
for the boing boing.
I could hear whatever it was still scratching against the wood, but I wasn't in the least bit scared.
Can't wait for
as I
the
figured
cat
it might just run
fishing.
away the first moment it saw the beam of my flashlight or heard my feet. It did exactly that, and I heard it running off into the darkness just before I turned the corner. But in place of the familiar four-legged cadence of a fox or a coyote, I heard the very distinct sound of something running, with 2 feet, not 4. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. And right hand to God, that realization made for the creepiest moment of my entire life. That whole time I thought everything was just fine, but there'd been some freaking creep scratching something into the wood that whole time, and I'd actually tried to go back to sleep. I darted back into the cabin, grabbed the biggest, heaviest thing I could find, this skillet, and then ran back outside. I wanted to shout something brave and hardcore, but the God's honest truth is I was scared out of my mind. I could barely even keep a straight thought in my head, let alone figure out anything intimidating to yell. So I just ran around,
Oh, I forgot
spinning around
the
like
other
a
answers.
top, shining the flashlight in every little shadow to make sure no one was about to creep up on me. Once I was pretty certain that the coast was actually clear, I ran back into the cabin, locked the front door, and then woke up my wife. She was still half drunk, but she sobered up pretty quickly when I told her to keep her cell phone handy, just in case I needed her to call 911. I still don't know if it was just a dumb prank or something. Kids vandalizing the cabins or deliberately trying to scare us or something. It all depended on what they'd been scratching into the wall, that much was clear. But I was in no mood to just wander back out into the dark to go check right away. We just stayed put for a few minutes, my hand tight around the skillet's handle, and listened out for any voices or footsteps or scratching. After a few minutes of silence,
It's winking,
I finally
yes.
crept out into the dark for 2 reasons. Number 1, to make sure that we were truly alone again, and number 2, to check out what the hell this creep had been doing to the cabin's outside wall. I was scared, but I was also ready to cave in the skull of any foolish person enough to rush me. Thankfully, I didn't have to defend myself like that, but there was nothing reassuring about what I'd found scratched into the cabin. When I first saw it, it looked like either a 0 or the letter O, underneath a roughly scratched letter U or V. The result was that it almost looked like someone had tried to write VO, but vertically instead of horizontally. No words immediately came to mind. I mean, if it was a K and then an I, then maybe they were trying to write the word kill, in which case we should be concerned. But VO, I had no idea what that might mean. Convinced that it was nothing more than kids being stupid little vandals, I told my wife that it was safe outside and she could come take a look at what the kids had been scratching. She seemed relieved to know that it was nothing too sinister and that we'd most probably remain undisturbed for the remainder of our stay. In fact, all we occupied our thought with for a minute or two was wondering if the owners would help themselves to our security deposit if they discovered the damage. After my wife had gotten some clothes on, we both headed outside to check the damage. I shined my flashlight at it, showing her the weird
You
V
make the
O
alerts
shapes,
in Live 2D.
watched
The
a very
ones
visible
for
look of
Dusty,
fright
yeah.
come over her face.
Cause
I asked her what
No
she thought
After
it was, and
Effects,
she asked how I
no
couldn't see it. To me,
spine.
it was just weird
Just
shapes or
do it
letters.
in Live
To
2D.
her, it was quite literally the devil. I'll be honest, I didn't really see it at first, and I thought it was just her nerves talking. But her fright proved
If
infectious,
it
and
works, it
when
works,
she
right?
decided that she didn't want to stay another night at the cabin, I was in no position to make her stay. I remember her saying, "This has red flags all over it. We'd be morons not to leave now." And honestly, she was right. It didn't really matter who it was or why they'd been scratching something into the wall of our cabin. Our car was out front, and they could quite literally see the cabin was occupied. And who the hell goes snooping around the woods in the middle of the night like that anyway?
Hey.
No one with any good in mind, that's for sure. We packed our stuff, threw it all into our car, and then left as soon as we could. First, my wife called the cops to report what had happened, and then she left a message with the owner of the cabin explaining the situation. They were kind enough to refund our final night's stay and returned our security deposit in full, thus ruling out our bizarre conspiracy theory that the owners were trying to claim our security deposit. We still have no idea who or what was really going on that night, and honestly, I'm open to the idea that we just overreacted to some dumb prank or something. But having said that, I have no regrets about
Pull
cutting
out
our
Blender and
vacation
start
short
animating
because
anytime
my
now?
wife is
No,
right.
no, 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 no.
We've seen enough horror
No, no,
movies
no,
to know
no.
that you don't stick
Why
around
Blender?
once things
Also, why
get
Blender?
weird.
Remove the head and the body from this.
One of my earliest memories is being in the playground at a new school, trying to make friends. This was year 3, so elementary school age for the Americans reading, and I came across a group of lads playing football. I asked one of them if I could join in, and he told me, "Yeah, but only if you just pass to me." It seemed
The
like a fair
sudden
deal,
accent
so I accepted.
change.
The next day,
Cause
I
it's
asked the same
hard.
lad if I
And
could
that's why
sit
you
with
want
him
me
at
to do
lunchtime,
it?
and he
Why
said,
not you do
"Yeah,
it?
but only if I can have
You're
a
here.
pudding."
Hello, Bobok.
Off to your
Welcome.
fare that time, but
Welcome
I
in.
agreed nevertheless, and then we ate lunch in near silence. I didn't touch my pudding, assuming this lad was going to take it when he was good and ready, but when he'd finished his pudding, I offered him
Stand
mine,
that
and he suddenly had a
body.
change of heart. He shook his head, pushed the little bowl back in my direction, and we've been friends ever since. Walker, as I came to call him on account of it being his second name, was my best mate all throughout primary school, and we ended up in the same secondary school too. I had my first pint with him. Our first girlfriends were best friends, and he was part of almost every significant event in my teenage years in some form or another. We were finally separated by going to different unis, and we kept in touch, and he ended up moving back here for work once he'd graduated. He was there for me all through my breakups. He helped me move into my first real flat, and I was the best man in his wedding, and the list goes on and on. I was there for all the ups and downs of him and Kathy buying a house, having a baby, all that other grown-up stuff, and I was the first person Walker called about the accident. So it was early April when he rang me up at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I knew something was going on because of how late the call came, but I never could have guessed of how terrible the news was.
Yeah,
Kathy
I'm
had walked my
impressed.
daughter back from playgroup when
I don't
two
see you,
joy
you're way
riders
too
plowed
small.
into them at the
You
house,
touch it.
and their little girl was pronounced dead on the scene. Well, Kathy passed away
Don't
in the
you
hospital
me,
bed,
you
fighting
started
for her
first.
life.
You
In just a few hours,
failed
Walker's whole world had been
at
snatched away from
the
him
emos.
by two monsters in a
I
BMW,
cannot believe
and
this.
he was every bit as devastated
You
as you
actually
can
failed
imagine.
at the emos.
He was signed
How?
off sick from work, prescribed antidepressants,
What do you
and
do?
then went to live with his parents because he just couldn't look after himself. We all pitched in looking after him, making sure that he stayed away from the drink and all that, but that was just about all we could do.
What a
Losing my
fail,
wife and
Kachan,
kid
what a
like that,
fail.
just totally out of the blue. A person's gotta get through that on their own, you know? And for ages, Walker just seemed paralyzed, and I honestly couldn't blame him. But the one day, I get a very surprising text from him that just said, "Are you up for some rambling?" Just to explain, rambling was what we called the hiking/camping trips that we used to go on when we were younger. I think we always fancied ourselves soldiers, but since we'd never be able to pass the piss test, wink wink, we settled for these epic rambles
Wink,
across the
wink.
countryside, sometimes for a week at a time. We'd camp out in different locations every night and then return home unshowered and stinking of campfire smoke. In between getting very unsober and telling ghost stories around the fire at night, it was bloody good fun.
Guacamole?
We managed to
What?
make 5 or 6 big and small
What do
trips
you
with our
even
jobs and
mean by
girlfriends while eating up
guacamole?
all our time. But as much as I
What
looked
does that
forward to
even
the
mean?
day that we got to go again, I thought it might have been a bit too
Hot
soon.
bottom.
After talking it over, we settled on the second week of April, almost 1 year after the accident. I tried telling myself the timing of it was nothing but a coincidence, but at the same time, I completely understood if he wanted to get away from it all for a few days, especially around the 1 year anniversary. There was always something quite soothing about our rambles. If you're running out of food and water while exposed to the elements, there's no time to worry about problems you got back in the, air quotes, real world. I didn't know how far that would extend into devastating grief, but in the short term, it definitely seemed to work. With him having something to focus his mind on, Walker seemed much more chipper. He was ordering camping gear online, testing it out in his mom's back garden, and with all the planning that we had to do, he was much chattier too. It was just like the old times in many ways, but with one distinct difference, aside from the obvious stuff. Walker had suggested a place
I
for us to
streamed
visit.
this week already, so no take
Anyone
my
reading
soul.
this might be like,
Nah,
yeah, so what?
your soul
We
has
never
already
made
been
any of the
taken.
decisions when it came to
What are
any
you
of our
talking about?
rambling trips.
Also, have a
After
good
I
night.
took the lead in planning the first couple, and they all went as planned, he decided
Maybe
to
that's
leave
why
that
your
side of
brain
things
is
to me so he could
messed
focus
up
on
because you
gear and
didn't
getting us there. So, when he told me he wanted to visit the Scottish Highlands, and in particular a place called Lochinver, it made for a refreshing change, if I'm being honest. We'd never been to the Highlands before, so I was very keen to go, as it was, but Walker's zigzagging route included a lot of freshwater lakes, some hill walking, and a big dirty fry-up at the end of it, which to me sounded absolutely banging. The longest we'd ever been rambling for was a week, and since we were only just starting back up again, it didn't really surprise me when he said that he only wanted to go for 2 days. I was just made up that he seemed to be getting back to himself again, but if I'd have known what he really had planned, I don't think I'd have ever gone with him. Everything seemed fine on the drive up to Lochinver. In fact, it was just like old times. We took turns driving and putting on old playlists and generally reveling in a bit of nostalgia to kill time on the drive. Parking was easy and cheap, and then add some unexpectedly good weather for April into the mix, and you had a great start to a properly epic hike. Considering it was his first time, Walker had done a stand-up job of planning our route, and it took us over some incredible-looking country. We must have walked around for 5 or 6 miles, up and down a gently sloping hill, and then along a narrow river until we came to a small loch. The way down was very steep, and the river dropped off into a waterfall which fed into the larger lake. It made for some banging scenery, and I knew immediately that it was going to be our first camping spot, and I'd have pat Walker on the back if I didn't think it'd send him toppling down the slope. We found a nice, flat, grassy spot about 50 meters away from the water's edge, and then set up our little A-frame shelters facing one another. Once we were set up, we brewed up some tea on our hexamine burners and then set about gathering up firewood for the night. We were quiet while we worked, and I put this down to us both concentrating on the job of finding decent kindling, but afterwards, Walker didn't seem to perk up again. I realized about halfway into cooking my dinner that he wasn't going to join me, but he said that he wasn't feeling hungry and would eat later on when the feeling came to him. But later came and went, and he still didn't seem to have anything to eat. We stayed up quite late too, and all we did was sit by the fire, swapping stories. But I didn't see so much as a morsel pass his lips. When I turned into bed, Walker said that he'd only be staying up a little while longer to watch the stars. That didn't raise any alarm bells, but what did was when I woke up about 6 or 7 hours later and found him still sat by the fire. I'm not talking sat by the fire making a brew with bedhead, having obviously gotten at least a few hours kip. I'm talking same position, tent seemingly undisturbed, like he hadn't moved a muscle for hours on end. The first words out of my mouth when I scooched out of my shelter were, "Did you not get any sleep?" He didn't need to answer me. The big black bags under his eyes said everything, and it was around then that I started to
No
realize
sleep.
that agreeing to the camping trip might not have been a good idea. I asked him if he was okay and actually laughed a little when he told me, a bit tired. I responded by asking him if he was really okay, before telling him that there was no shame in tapping out and going home if he really didn't feel up to it. In any other circumstances, if someone had given me some cryptic answer like, I just had a lot on my mind, I'd have told them to bugger off and talk plain English. But in Walker's case, I knew what he was talking about, or rather, I assumed I knew. His reply shut me up for a minute, and when I finally thought of something else to say, I offered him some coffee to help perk him up a bit. He turned the offer down, saying his stomach was feeling a bit rough and would stick to water for the time being. I left him chill by the fire while I went to gather some more firewood, and while I was gone, I did some thinking. He turned down coffee, he turned down dinner the night before, and I didn't see any empty packaging or used mess tins when I woke up. This meant that Walker had either cleaned and stowed away all of his cooking gear and utensils, immaculately at that, or he hadn't eaten a single frigging thing in more than 24 hours. I stopped collecting firewood the second it occurred to me, and while I didn't go dropping what I'd already collected, I immediately walked back to camp. In the nicest way possible, without trying to sound like his mum or anything like that, I told him he needed to eat if he was going to have the strength to hike anywhere else. I felt for him, I really did, but he had to look after himself because being out in the highlands, miles from road, was not the time to start intermittent fasting. I kept on rabbiting for a bit, generally just pleading with him to talk to me. Then, in frustration, I walked over to his rucksack, opened it up, and started rummaging around for his food supply. I rummaged and rummaged and rummaged some more before I realized that Walker didn't bring any food. It wasn't just some oopsie-daisy either. He'd done it deliberately. But why? The obvious thing that came to mind, and what just about scared the life out of me to think about, was the idea that he'd driven us out there so he could take his own life. To my infinite relief, he denied that was the case, but when he got all cryptic again, I told him that he could tell me what was going on, or I was leaving. It was a total bluff, but it worked, and that's when he told me, or partially told me, what he had planned. There was no hike, no tour around the locks for a few days before a big dirty fry-up in Lochinver. He, and I use his words, needed to do something for Kathy and the baby, and that something involved not eating and not sleeping. He was okay to drink water, but only when he was really dying of thirst, and when he'd refrained from eating and sleeping for 3 days, he was going to go into the waterfall. Remember the waterfall I mentioned, the one that we had a view from our campsite? Well, Walker said that there was a shallow alcove in the rock behind it. It was nothing big, just enough room for a single person to sit without getting too wet, and when I asked him how he knew, he told me that he'd verified during the night. Everything was exactly how it said it would be, and when I asked what it was, Walker said that he was too tired to explain. The only reason he partially explained what he was doing was that he needed me there, and he believed that if he didn't tell me, then I might have actually left. He knew what it looked like, a guy starving himself because he's tired of living or something, but he assured me that it wasn't like that. He needed me there to help him get back to the car when he was done because chances were he'd be too weak to do it on his own. I remember sitting there by the fire for a minute or two, stunned into silence, just trying to wrap my head about what Walker was telling me. When I finally got my thoughts together, I asked him why he needed to sit in that little alcove after 3 days of no food or sleep. I'd help him, all right. I just needed to know why. Again, he just said something along the lines of, "It's for Kathy and the baby." And if I'm honest, that was as good as an explanation as I needed. I had next to no idea what he was trying to do, but I knew that it would be hard, and probably dangerous too. But what else can you do when a friend asks you to do something like that, telling you that they can't trust anyone else to do it? There was no dragging him out of there. Leaving him was just out of the question. And as much as it seemed like the best option, calling the emergency services felt like betrayal. Imagine someone putting all that trust into you and you just turn around and have them locked up. I know that that's the emotional and not rational response, but in the moment, it just didn't feel right. There seemed like no other option but to do as he asked and make sure that whatever he was going to put himself through, he made it out the other side okay. As it turned out, the first day of his fast was actually the day before we drove up, the second being the hike out to the waterfall. Walker did seem a bit tired out in the hike, but I just put that down to age and a bad night's sleep or something. So, that second day we were in the Highlands. That was going to be the third and final day of no eating or sleeping, meaning his whole plan was going to be over and done by the early hours of the morning. It sounded like good news when I heard it, but it was still proper worrying to see him in such a rough state. It was the lack of sleep that really wore him down. You could watch his brain just frazzling from being awake for so long, with sod all to fuel it. And when he went to the toilet, his pee looked brown. Not that unhealthy-looking dark yellow that you see after a summer's night in a beer garden. It was this sickly brown, like rum or whiskey or something. I know it might seem a bit odd fixating on his pee like that, but stuff like that's quite shocking when you've never seen it before. It wasn't just his body either. It was his mind. He started saying things twice, stumbling over words and then skipping back to an early part of a conversation, like he just lost his train of thought and 10 or 20 minutes hadn't gone by. And by the time the sun started to go down, I was ready for it to be over. But we had quite a way to go before that. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night either. I wasn't entirely convinced that Walker wasn't going to try and hurt himself in some way. I just had to trust that he wouldn't. I quizzed him more and more as the night went on, but he became less and less in the mood for chat. However, he did tell me that he had been thinking about that night for months and had gone over it in his head so many times that it bored him to think about, let alone talk about. He told me he understood how annoying that must be, but he would tell me all about it when it was over. But until then, I had to wait. When the time finally came, I walked him over to the waterfall and he began to take off his clothes. I suppose that was always a given. He didn't want to get his only jacket and pair of boots soaking wet in the process. But it was still bloody freezing out, and he was shaking like a dog as he passed me that last of his clothes. Over the sound of the waterfall, I heard him tell me that if he called out or wasn't back out within an hour, I was to go in and pull him out. He would be naked and soaking wet in the freezing Scottish night, and he would be in danger of getting hypothermia if he stayed exposed for too long. And that only added to all the anxiety as he thanked me one last time, turned, and disappeared into the water. Exactly 27 minutes had gone by when I first thought that I heard something over the sound of the waterfall. I remember straining my ears, thinking that they might have been playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. It was barely audible over the sound of the waterfall, but it sounded an awful lot like a person. And then suddenly, there was Walker. He was as white as a sheet, skinny as a rake, and shivering violently. Then there were the noises that he was making, and my God, they were inhuman. Not quite weeping, not quite screaming, all blunted by 3 days of no food or sleep. As soon as he reached the banks of the stream, he just collapsed, and I threw his jacket around him. He couldn't speak, he could barely move, and I did everything I could to drag him back to the fire and plonk him down next to it so he could properly warm up. I asked him if he could eat, and he nodded very weakly, so I threw a few cereal bars and a bottle of water in front of him. I had to actually feed him and bring the bottle to his lips to get him to eat properly. Walker ate slowly, with silent tears rolling down his cheeks, and I'd be a liar if I said that I didn't shed a few too. Once he had gotten a bit of food and water in him, Walker asked me to help him into his tent so he could finally sleep. I made sure that he was dry, helped him into a few underlayers, and then eased him into his sleeping bag. I think he was asleep before I had even finished tucking him in, and I wanted nothing more than to climb into my own sleeping bag for some well-deserved rest. But when it came to it, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was trapped between being too tired to stay awake and too scared to fall asleep. But then the harder I tried to fight it, the easier it came. I don't know exactly what time it was at that point, but I remember there being a little creeping blue in the distant horizon. I closed my eyes for a second, and then the next thing I knew, It was full daylight. My eyes burned, and I felt sick from how exhausted I was. But when I saw that Walker was still there, asleep and breathing, I knew everything was going to be fine. I tried to catch a few more hours, but an overactive brain fueled by a disco nap made that a no-go. I wanted to wake him up, make him eat a little bit more, and get some coffee down him, but it was for selfish reasons. What I really wanted to know was what happened in the waterfall, what he'd put himself through hell for. But God knows he needed the rest, and there'd be plenty of time for questions on the way back. I suppose this piece is long enough as it stands, so I'll try to summarize that conversation as best I can. After getting Walker back into Lochinver safely, we had a little bit more food, bought Walker one of those big bottles of Lucozade so he could carry on replenishing on the drive, and then started on our journey back home.
Nap time.
He didn't tell me much about what he'd done or why he'd done it. He said that he was still taking
You
it
should
all
take a
on
nap
himself.
like Tachan is
But the
taking.
long and short of it was this. He'd read something online about that waterfall. Something about how old monks used to go there to have religious experiences. The story went that if you concentrated on praying for someone hard enough, someone who had already passed on, you could either hear them, see them, talk to them, or something to that effect. The only rule was that you had to sit there for 3 days with nothing but the water in front of you to drink. Obviously, Walker had tried to streamline the process for safety and convenience, thinking that as long as he drank a little of the water, he could do all the fasting and staying awake away from the waterfall itself. He'd been quite worried that it had ruined the process and therefore ruined the desired effect, but it didn't. According to Walker, the process had worked exactly as intended. I feel like I have to explain at this point I'm not a religious person and I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or any of that oogly-boogly nonsense. I think Walker pushed himself to his physical and psychological limits and induced a kind of visual or auditory hallucination, and I think deep down he knows that too. The thing is, he doesn't care, and I don't really blame him either. And as much as I'm not going to pretend to know how it worked, I understand why he wanted to do it.
Items should be enough.
To have that opportunity to see or talk to a missed relative, even if it isn't real, I admit to seeing the appeal. Whatever happened, Walker started doing much better after the trip. Everyone put it down to finally getting back to the great outdoors and reliving a bit of his youth. We never told anyone what had actually happened. Walker didn't swear me to secrecy or anything like that, but he didn't have to. Because whatever happened in that little alcove behind the waterfall, that's between him and his dearly departed. I'm a 31-year-old female, originally from Oregon, and I was 28 when the story took place. Back during the whole #MeToo thing, I remember talking to a friend of mine about the whole not all men thing. We both agreed that it's a ridiculous state to label all men as predators, but we disagreed on something a little more nuanced. My friend believed that since just about anyone, no matter how nice they looked or how pleasant they acted, could be a predator, it made sense to exercise a degree of caution around every man outside of immediate family. I thought it was quite a pessimistic way of looking at things, and that it made sense to employ the caution of a case-by-case basis. I'm not going to plug the first 2 digits of 911 into my phone if an Uber driver asks me how my day's been, but follow me down a dark side street and I'm reaching for my pepper spray. We went back and forth like that for a while over a few glasses of alcohol, and as much as there are always friendly exchanges, we never got to any solid conclusions. However, my friend said something that really stuck with me. It's not all men, but one is enough. I had no idea how right she truly was. You see, a few months later, I drove out to government camp in my native Oregon, parked my car in the old Golden Poles parking lot, and then headed up for my favorite trail into the foothills of Mount Hood. I went for 2 reasons. Number 1, I was itching to get outdoors again after 6 months of being locked inside, and number 2, I was working on a photography project as part of my lockdown side hustle, and getting the right pictures of the mountain and its surroundings were a huge part of it. Anyway, I walk up to just about where the ski runs start, took my pictures, then started making my way back down towards town, snapping shots along the way. About halfway down, I reach a fork in the trail on my left, and when I looked, I saw someone standing there on the trail. They immediately stood out because they weren't wearing hiking gear, and I'd never seen anyone so far up the trail who wasn't wearing ski or hiking attire. He had long hair, sneakers, baggy shorts, and a t-shirt, just your average white skater guy, maybe 20 to 24 years old. I guess that's not entirely out of the ordinary on its own, but this guy had no backpack, no water bottle, he just looked lost. We made eye contact for a second, and I gave him a polite smile before heading off on my way. But as I did, I heard him call after me with something like, "Does this trail head up the mountain?" I told him no, but it'd lead him to a trail that would take him up the mountain, and then I wished him luck and carried on walking. I don't think I even got 4 or 5 steps away before I heard him call out again, only that time, he said something so strange it actually made me do one of those silent little laughs. The guy says, and in a way that made it sound like there had been some minor confusion, "Hey, I think that's my bag." I stopped, smiled at how crazy of a statement it was, and then turned back and told him with just a hint of laughter that he must be confused. He started walking towards me, slowly and casually, saying, "Nah, that's totally my bag. I've been looking for it all afternoon." Giving him the benefit of the doubt, I just slipped my backpack off my shoulders and then showed him, like, "I can promise you, it's mine. It even has my name on it, see?" And I showed him the tag, saying Maddie. He leaned in and squinted, like the writing was tiny and not in big block capital letters, then asked me in a voice that sounded genuinely hurt, "Why would you do that?" I remember literally hearing that "F this, I'm out" jingle in my head, and this guy was either playing a stupid prank on me, with his buddy recording from behind a tree, or he was actually crazy, and I wasn't about to stick around to find out which one. I turned my politeness up to 100, smiled and told him, "I'm so sorry, I gotta go. I hope you find your bag, okay?" He stayed quiet as I turned and began to walk away, and I found myself hoping that that'd be the end of the exchange. But as I found out, that was more wishful thinking than accurate assessment. As the sound of his footsteps followed me down the trail, I started to get nervous. This wasn't some unusual encounter with a weirdo stranger anymore. The weirdo stranger was now following me down a quiet hillside trail with not another soul in sight. Remember what I said about pepper spray in side streets? Well, that rule applies to mountain trails too, and I always keep one of those cute little miniature pepper sprays on my car keys. In one smooth motion, I slipped my backpack off my shoulder again, shoved a hand into the little pocket where I kept my car keys, and then shoved them into my pocket for easier access. And once that was in place, I felt a little more comfortable getting vocal again. I asked the guy if he was following me. He told me yes, because I had his backpack. I told him that's not a funny joke, and it wasn't funny the first time, and he told me it wasn't a joke. He wanted his backpack returned, and if I didn't give it to him, he was going to have to take it. As we're still walking, me with my back to him, and him about 15 feet behind me, I told the guy that it was starting to sound like he was threatening me. When he heard that, he took on this sort of indignant tone, asking me how dare I try and play the victim when it was me that had stolen his backpack. I was so convinced that it was a prank by that period that I actually stopped, turned around and started looking for the similarly dumb-looking skater guy with some smartphone, and looking back on it, I think that was just wishful thinking. If there was someone else there, I wasn't dealing with another crazy person, but when I realized that we were truly alone on the trail, that was not a nice feeling, I can tell you that. So once it hit me that this guy is either crazy or trying to rob me in the weirdest way imaginable, I reach for my pepper spray. I take it out, I show him, and he pulls that frustrated card again. I tell him if he doesn't stop following me, I'm gonna pepper spray him, and then I'm calling the cops. He responds by saying stuff like, "Do it, call the cops. That's my bag you're carrying, with my stuff in it." Once again, I told him if he came within 5 feet of me, I was gonna pepper spray him, and then I turned back and immediately realized the problem that I was facing. If I wanted to really be safe, I'd have to walk freaking backwards the whole rest of the way down to government camp. The best I could do was keep a minimum safe distance and just keep my hand on my pepper spray. This guy trailed me for a great distance for a while, yelling after me as we walked down, and the more he talked, the more obnoxious he got. Like I might have mentioned at the start that he was acting polite and well-mannered, then he switched to the victim tone that he'd adopted. But as time went on, he got more and more obnoxious. I remember at one point he said something like, "I just don't understand why you're being such a bee about it. Just admit that you're wrong already and hand over my stuff." And then as he got more aggressive, it became things like, "You need therapy. You could do hours of sessions and not work out all the crap you got going on in your head." He actually said that. My blood was boiling, but I knew better than to react. If anything, he just wanted to stop me so he could close the distance again, or failing that, he just wanted this weird attention that I chose not to give him. Aside from the occasional look over my shoulder to make sure that he wasn't trying to close in on me, I tried not to give the guy so much as a word. The distance from where I ran into the guy and where the trail ended was maybe only a mile, so after a few minutes walking, I could literally see people walking around near the houses at the end of East Blossom Trail, and just seeing them was a huge relief. I felt like I was almost back on a friendly territory, you know? That even if the guy was being a jerk, he wouldn't dare put his hands on me if there were other people around. But even better, I suddenly see these two hikers walking up the trail towards us. I figured rather than risk this guy following me back to my car, I'd ask these hikers to accompany me, but as we got closer, the guy following me tried one last trick. The second I called out to the two hikers, he started screaming over me. He was saying stuff like, "Help me, my sister is off her meds and she wants to take her own life. You gotta help me, grab her." I remember looking back at him, completely boiling over at that point, wondering if I'd actually ran into the biggest moron or psychopath on the face of the planet. And then as I turned back to call out something to oppose what he said, I heard these fast, heavy footsteps coming up at me. I remember turning, seeing the guy sprinting at me, and letting off a burst of pepper spray at the last second before he collided with me. Thank Christ, most if not all of the spray was effective, despite his efforts to shield his face as he ran at me. So as I found my feet, I was shaken, but I was still furious, and it was deeply satisfying to see him rubbing his eyes, screaming in pain. The hikers had ran up onto the scene by the time I was up again, and I explained everything very clearly, that the creep was not my brother, and that he'd been harassing me all the way down the trail. They very kindly told me that they'd keep him there for as long as it took to lose sight of me, and as I walked off, I pulled out my phone and I called the cops. I was almost at the end of the trail when I heard this scream. You can't tell me crap. Just from a way distance away, and then right as I looked back, the two hikers were wrestling this guy to the ground. I just kept walking as I relayed all of this information to 911, feeling incredibly thankful that those two hikers showed up when they did. Even when I thought it was safe, I know now looking back on it that I wasn't. People have been snatched in broad daylight before, and there's no telling what would have happened if he continued to follow me. What I find incredibly creepy to this day is just how devious he tried to be, and how he seemed to enjoy trying to mentally overpower me as opposed to physically overpowering me. Although I do get the feeling that the mental thing was just an appetizer for something that he never got a chance to do. I couldn't tell if he was truly psychotic or just mentally ill. Born on December 19th of 1986, Christina Kaleka grew up in Canada as the only daughter of divorced Filipino migrants Elizabeth and Mario Kaleka. Like many Filipinos, she had a devoutly Catholic upbringing and was also described as hardworking and a natural leader, with ambitions of attending teachers' college at Toronto's York University. At 5'2" and 125 pounds, she kept in shape by playing volleyball and would only occasionally try jogging. Just before the civic holiday of 2007, Christina had planned to take part in a Christian youth conference in the city of Montreal. But at the last minute, she pulled out in favor of a hiking trip to Ontario's Rainbow Falls Provincial Park, accompanied by her 20-year-old cousin, Faith Costello, and two friends, Eddie Miga and Joe Benedict. Rainbow Falls Provincial Park covers an area of about 2 square miles and is located on Highway 17 between the towns of Schreiber and Rossport. There are 2 main camping areas within its boundaries: the primary White Sand Lake site, which is just a few hundred meters from the park's entrance, and the smaller Rossport site, which is 3 kilometers to the west, not far from the Trans-Canada Highway. The vast majority of the hiking trails in the park are relatively easy, averaging between 3 and 5 kilometers. The only exception is the Cask Isles Trail, which is a whopping 32 miles long and runs through the park from Rossport all the way to Terrace Bay. But step off the trails into Rainbow Falls and you'll run into what some have described as the most rugged terrain in the province. Just after 12 p.m. on Sunday, August 5th of 2007, Christina and friends arrived at the park. Christina had been at the wheel for the 14-hour drive from Toronto, and after completing what had turned into a 2-day journey, the group were exhausted. They set up camp on Lot 88 of the White Sand Lake campsite, then exchanged a few friendly greetings with their new but temporary neighbors. White Sand Lake was very busy that weekend, with only a handful of lots left unoccupied. Yet as the hustle and bustle of the holiday weekend went on outside, Christina and her friends settled down for a nap. The group were exhausted from their 2-day drive, so what was intended to be a half-hour nap turned into more like a 4-hour snooze. They awoke around 10:30 at night, made a small campfire, and then ate dinner together while consuming a small amount of alcohol. Around 3:30 a.m., the group decided to head back to bed, and all are thought to have been asleep within 30 minutes. 3 hours later, Christina woke up Eddie and asked him to accompany her to the campsite's communal showers. According to Eddie, the pair had planned to go running together at dawn, and after washing and dressing themselves, they headed out into the trails. The pair ran together for a period of around 30 minutes, then, at some point, Christina began to tire. Then, upon reaching an intersection near the park entrance, the pair decided to split up. Eddie would continue along the longer of the 2 trails towards Highway 17, while Christina opted to visit the nearby eponymous Rainbow Falls waterfall before returning to camp. Eddie only made so far as a small, roadside picnic area before he too began to tire. He briefly stopped to catch his breath, carved the first initials of all 4 members into a rock, and then made his way back to camp. He claimed to have spent the next few hours searching for an axe to whittle down some oversized logs, but was unable to find one. At around 9:30 a.m., Joe Benedict and Faith Costello emerged from their tents. They made breakfast and took showers, believing Christina would return at any moment, but by 11 a.m., they began to grow concerned. Joe and Eddie went down one of the trails to the waterfall Christina had wanted to visit. They also searched the Lake Superior Trail and Rainbow Falls Trail, as well as a number of other trails they suspected her to have jogged down, but she was nowhere to be found. The 2 men remained calm and refrained from raising the alarm, believing that Christina would soon be found. However, by mid-afternoon, she had yet to reappear. Around 2 p.m., the group approached a park ranger to report Christina missing. Park rangers then joined the group of friends in continuing their search of nearby trails and beaches. When it became evident that she was missing, they advised them to report her disappearance to the police. The Ontario Police's Regional Emergency Response Team took charge of the search and quickly established a command post near White Sand Island. Almost 100 personnel then scoured the area, including police officers, firefighters, and specifically trained divers who searched nearby lakes and streams. They utilized GPS equipment, underwater radar, infrared cameras, and 4 canine units, along with 2 fixed-wing airplanes, a float plane, 3 helicopters, and a plethora of watercraft, but no trace of Christina could be found. Poor weather and rough terrain made the search extremely difficult, and some search personnel were severely injured in the course of their work. One man needed emergency surgery when a rappelling accident resulted in horrific facial lacerations, while another was taken to the hospital with a sprained ankle and twisted knee following a nasty fall down a steep slope. An unusual aspect of the search involved the use of tracker dogs, who were walking up and down the Rainbow Falls and Cask Isles trails in search of Christina's scent. Although they picked up her trail in places that she had been running with Eddie Miga, there was no traces of her anywhere else, including up near Rainbow Falls. She was gone, all right, but her scent trail suggested that she had left the park. At this point, the search for Christina became highly scientific. The search teams began studying maps of the area in order to identify so-called anthropogenic corridors. This is a fancy term for what we might refer to as natural pathways that occur off the beaten path, such as streams or rivers, even electrical lines. Anything a person might believe will lead them back to civilization. The search team also based their Phase 2 search areas as a highly advanced lost hiker behavioral profile. This stated that there was a 90% chance that she was still within a 5-mile radius of her last known position, but her condition remained another question entirely. The strategy led to some interesting developments in the search. A pair of socks were recovered from a deep pool of water in the Hewitson River, a tributary that feeds into the larger White Sands Lake. Search teams also found several footprints in a mossy area of the ground not far from the waterfall. While the footprints matched Calica's shoe size, the lack of preserved tread pattern made it impossible to determine if they were created by one of her running shoes. Against the advice of provincial police, Christina's family traveled out to Rainbow Falls. There, they set up a series of tents on lots rented by friends and well-wishers and refused to leave until Christina was found. They were joined by Raul Escarpe, a Catholic priest and fellow Filipino-Canadian who performed special masses for the family to allay their fears. Escarpe also helped raise the case's public profile, and within just a few days, a team of around 200 volunteers was scouring the surrounding area. The team included politicians from nearby Schreiber and Terrace Bay, but also some very experienced search and rescue personnel who weren't just using the opportunity as a photo op. August 11th saw a search that lasted a full 8 hours, covering the area between the provincial parks East Beach and Highway 17. The following day signaled another long search, but this time, less than 100 of the original volunteers showed up to try again. Frustrated with the lack of results, Christina's family openly admitted that their hope was fading. High-ranking Ontario police officers assured them that the chances of her survival were high, but her loved ones were quite clearly prepared for the worst. They've used canine units, they've used planes, they've used submarines, Christina's uncle despaired. They've used all sorts of different ways to find Christina, and nothing, absolutely nothing works. There's no clue at all. By August 21st, the police began using a chilling euphemism to refer to Christina as a non-responsive person, meaning that she would not have been able to reply if she heard searchers calling her name. The move prompted law enforcement to reallocate all aircraft and canine units away from the search, leaving only a skeleton crew of 20 officers to continue the effort. And then finally, 2 days later, the search was called off, and it was announced that investigative theories now surrounded the possibility of abduction. However, the Calica family once again openly criticized the investigation, claiming the abduction theory wasn't based on any concrete evidence. It was widely accepted that, alive or dead, she was clearly no longer in the park. But if that was the case, where did she go? Some maintain that Christina vanished as a result of a bear attack, and that any potential remains were carried off and consumed by the animal. Yet if this was the case, there would most certainly be plenty of evidence in the form of ripped clothing, blood, or drag marks. Stephen Herrero of the University of Calgary, who once authored a weighty tome on the nature and circumstances of bear attacks, was quoted as saying it was not impossible, but highly unlikely that Christina had fallen victim to a bear, and that predators of that kind rarely travel more than 600 feet before consuming a kill. Another distinct possibility that Christina died as a result of what might legally be referred to as misadventure. Many have cited Christina's lack of experience when it came to wilderness hiking, and believe that it likely led to her becoming lost and disoriented, especially if she was already exhausted following their long 2-day journey. But again, if this had been the case, some trace of her would have been recovered, even if it was the tragic discovery of her lifeless body. Prior to Christina, the only other person missing in the park was recovered safely in less than 9 hours, and 95% of all missing person cases are solved within the first 24 hours. With this in mind, we start to understand the frustrations experienced by law enforcement and why more and more of those involved began to suspect foul play. As recently as 2018, Catherine's mother had expressed her belief that her daughter was either abducted or murdered. Citing the proximity of the nearby Trans-Canada Highway, Elizabeth believed her overly trusting daughter might have provided the perfect target to a potential killer who would then be able to almost instantly abscond. Despite accusations that Christina's 3 friends had something to do with her disappearance, they have vehemently denied any involvement and are not considered suspects. Don MacArthur, a former mayor of Schreiber, has stated that he doesn't believe any local resident is guilty of her abduction or murder. According to him, the only other known homicide in the area occurred back in 2005 and was mostly related to the local drug trade. Perhaps one of the most probable theories was posted by the host of CBC's The Next Call podcast with David Ridgen. He suggested that convicted child predator Dennis Leveille might have been involved in Christina's disappearance, given his history of abusing teenage girls. What's more, her disappearance fits into the window of time in which Leveille was actively preying. Ridgen has theorized that following her run, Christina took off her socks to wade into the waters of the Hewitson River, and it was there that she was ambushed by her killer. He dismissed the notion that the socks recovered from the river could not have belonged to Christina, saying that they only appeared larger due to being submerged for so long. Ridgen's theories, though seemingly well thought out, have been roundly dismissed by the Ontario Provincial Police, who don't believe Christina was deliberately or maliciously killed. In fact, 1 or 2 detectives even floated the idea that Christina intentionally disappeared to sever ties with her community and family. It certainly wouldn't be the first time that a member of a strict religious community had a sudden change of heart, and rather than face the ire and shame of their loved ones, they disappeared themselves instead. However, there is a strong evidence to suggest that Christina had a wonderful relationship with her parents and continued to share their deep Christian faith. She was unwavering in her attendance of certain Christian youth organizations, and even after pulling out of her most recent conference, she opted for a weekend camping with friends that she met at one of those very same conferences. Granted, the possibility can't be entirely ruled out, as people have hidden worse secrets from their families before. But in this case, whatever happened to Christina certainly didn't happen of her own volition. Other search and rescue personnel have questioned the effectiveness of the entire search effort. One volunteer claimed that entire sections of the forest were so dense that if a person were to become immobilized, the mass of surrounding vegetation would be enough to keep their body upright. This would potentially obscure the body from any other aerial search teams, which by far covered the most ground during the search. Ontario Police Officer Greg Beasley also spoke of such difficulties, telling one journalist that when you trip, you don't fall down. Perhaps the closest any investigation has come to uncovering the truth behind Christina's disappearance was back in March of 2009. Jeff Hasse, a volunteer with the Minnesota Search and Rescue nonprofit, stated that he believed volunteers actually located Christina's remains in November of 2009. During this privately funded search, 6 cadaver dogs indicated the presence of human remains at a location in the Hewitson River, but further investigation was made impossible by the speed and depth of the water. Hasse believes that if the private search and rescue teams had access to more advanced equipment, their task might have been concluded there and then. Perhaps that is indeed the case, and Christina Kaleka's remains lie deep under the waters of Rainbow Falls. But just as many other leads in the case have proven to be dead ends, perhaps the reason she's never been found in the park is that she's no longer there. As one police officer noted, the absence of remains is perhaps the best possible indicator that Christina was abducted, which begs the question, has the predator who took her met with some other kind of indirect justice, or do they still walk among us? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. I'd love to see you there. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, or submit one over email, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, toasters, toast, toast.
Okay. Do I need to go check in on Baldy? Hi, my name is Markiplier, and welcome to Baldy's Basics and Nightmares. I saw this, and I know what you're thinking. Oh man, Mark, don't you have a whole bunch of other games that you have on your list that you've been meaning to play and been promising that you would play for a very long time? And yeah, I do. That's true. Very much true. But then I saw this. And look, oh my god. I'm not gonna read that.
I thought my first moment turned into a body bit. It was me all along. Hello, Dustis.
So I saw
Hello,
this,
cat.
and then I remembered that, oh yeah, Baldy's Basics. I haven't heard about an update to that in a while. And this came out, and I was like, those other things can wait. Survive 30 seconds to unlock the secret ending. Good luck. Make sure you have visited the how to play tips for more in-game tips. Okay, welcome to
Chris, are you okay?
Dimension A,
Is it because you fell asleep?
left hole. D, what?
That was a lot of words for Hubble.
Why is my power running out so fast? Okay, X to hide the text. Oh! Why? Oh god, okay! Alright, I get it. Okay. Oh.
Yeah, whoa.
Okay. Oh, okay.
It's a mock.
Oh,
It is a
my
mock.
god! Oh my
It's
god!
indeed a mock. I can't say that I've enjoy Baldy that much, but it's mock.
I'm not doing this because I'm like, oh man, it's so scary. I'm doing this because my brain is breaking as to how my life decisions have led me to this point right here, right now. I can't fathom this game. I think they said, the developer said that this was made as like a joke, right? And honestly, you know, I'm not trying
Baldy
to like,
sucks.
shit on anything here. I'm always there down to encourage people to make the things that they want to
And
make.
Baldy
And
wasn't
I'm here to give anything a
good.
try. Because I remember Baldy's Basics, and I feel like everyone seems to have forgotten about Baldy's Basics.
I
But
didn't
you
really
know,
like
I can't say
Baldi's
that that game
Basics
was
either.
made well either, but that was intentional. And I feel like this one's intentional. So I don't even know what, okay. Baldy will appear either on the left, right, or middle. If he appears in the middle, play a sound. Okay. If he appears on the right, press L. If he appears on the left,
Oh,
go
the
back,
point of it
L.
was made to be
If
trash.
2D principles meter depletes
Well,
completely before sending to detention. Oh, that's the thing on the top. Okay, appearing at random, use of safety scissors. All right, press E when he appears. Press Q. Get rid of some characters here. Oh, God. Ah! Ah! All right, when I die to something, I will go look at how to beat it. 300 seconds. What
He
have I
decided
done?
to play this,
What
but
have I
he's
done?
raging
What have I
about it.
done? What have I done? I don't like that thing. I don't like that thing at all. Okay, so just any other Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, or you could probably say that this is more of a Baldi's fan game than it is a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, for sure. For definitely sure. Number one, you can hear the sound every time you change camera angles. That really makes me... And sweepy, you know. Oh.
What is this?
Oh. I'm having the best time. I'm having, that goes down. Hi. Hello. That goes down quick. Okay. Can I just keep my mouse here? Is there any other reason that I need to have it anywhere else? Sorry, now that my FNAF instincts are kicking in and my Baldi's instincts. Hi. Oh, wait. Oh my God! This isn't actually supposed to be stressful. This isn't actually supposed to be straining my magnificent abilities. And my abilities. Whoa, hi! Sorry, I closed my eyes for a second. Alright, so there's no punishment for hitting the sound when it's time to hit it. Oh my God! Okay, alright. So, I know this is supposed to be made as a joke, but it's actually not that bad, except for the whole thing where the machine kind of emerges from the ether. That is a little weird. But other than that, it seems manageable. Hi. That's too... Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! What the hell? What the hell? I think in the instructions it said when it's on the left you go quickly, but I'm kind of moving quickly from it anyway, so yes. So I guess just the moral of the story is don't hang out in the left for any reason. Man, that actually startled me. I can't believe I'm actually enjoying this. I mean, I never know if I'm actually enjoying this. Whenever I play like a FNAF fan game, I don't know if it's just because I'm being held hostage and it's more Stockholm Syndrome than anything, but it's weird, right? I kind of, you know, I have a giggle. I'm having a good time. It's not bad. I gotta make it, oh shit. Gotta make it to 300 seconds and that's taken away by the second now, okay. I'm gonna click outside of the game and I'm gonna die because it's so far. Oh my, no, wait a minute. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. The only one that's gonna throw me off is pressing L over on the right there. I'm never gonna be able to get that right. But I've almost got this. Oh, not today. Thank you. I don't know if that's a... Ooh, hi. God, you always appear at the last frame. Alright. Oh my God! Why is that the most terrifying one? Good God! Okay, at least I don't need to wait a duration to come back to it. At least it goes away immediately. That's nice. Oh. Hi. Yeah, okay. What? There's nothing happening. There's nothing. What do you mean? What? I can't move. I'm winning? What? What?
Great job!
What?
You survived 300 seconds. It's not much, but you won.
What? What? I don't understand anything that happened. But I won, I think. I did. I don't know. So, survive the real night. So was that not... What? I'm sorry. Oh my... What are you doing? Oh! What? Hi!
No items, no pass.
What?
He's so confused. I'm confused too.
Is that what this is? So this wasn't even the whole game. I thought this was all part of the same game. So all of this is now useless to me. Oh my god. Baldy will appear in the room to the left. He will speak whenever he's about to attack. Make sure to flash a light at him then. Make sure you don't flash a light when he isn't there after he's disappeared. What do you mean? Oh man. Click on him 7 times? Right on the, oh man. 1B soda to let you pass into the principal's. Oh man. Move right when at Baldy's room. Oh man. Alright, let me just go into it one more and I'll come back to read the instructions. Cause holy shit, it's appropriate that this is a school because that's a whole syllabus to be able to learn anything about what's happening here. What do I do to you? You're looking for me. What button do I press? I don't know. So go to the right for a something? What do I, oh. Oh, whoa! Okay, let me read this. Okay, Baldy will appear in the room to the left. We will
Can
speak
one
whenever
make
he's about
stingers
to attack.
in
Make
live
sure to
2D?
flash a
I'm
light at
sure
him
you
then.
can.
Control to use your flashlight.
Whoa.
Okay. Oh,
Hello,
E to
Ray.
shock first prize.
Thank you for
Spacebar to
the
jump.
tier 1
Click with the
resub for
flashlight by
15
controlling-
months.
By pressing control
Thank
of Arts and
you.
Crafters appears to get rid of it. Super hard
I'm sure
mode
you can
on.
make stingers
Nightmare
in live
Principle
2D.
will require you to flicker your
As
light
long
when
as
occurred. If his
you
meter stays up, if his meter depletes to 0, you'll be teleported to his
save
office
the
for a
animation and
detention.
you
Make sure to go to the
time
room on the
the
right
transition
frequently
right,
for the principal. Okay.
stingers will
Appearing
be
right behind you. Make sure to
A-okay.
shock him with E. Okay, got it. Appearing only in the main area. And left hallway. Okay. Jump 5 times. Oh, actually, she appears in the left hall too. Spacebar when she's there also. Click on him left 7. Okay, and then soda. Oh, okay, I got the hiccups now. I got the fear hiccups. I'm ready to go.
The Fury Cups.
My
Artist
computer
talks?
is, like,
Oh, no,
burning
no.
alive trying to
It's
render
just
the sheer
asking about
graphical
stingers,
fidelity
right?
of
Right.
this
That's not
beautiful school.
artist talks.
Okay, jump, jump, jump. Okay, got it. Right. Flashlight. Give. Okay, I got 2. Okay, right. Only when he's about to attack. Got it.
What?
This shouldn't be anything. This shouldn't be
You know,
anything.
wasp stingers? Stingers from the wasp?
This should be nothing.
Shoot nothing, he says.
This should be nothing. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. Wow, you're awful. Oh man, I don't even understand. Okay. I have no idea.
Bzz. Yes. Bzz.
Horrible! Everything about this. Big nightmare. Big nightmare. Oh yeah? There's my hall pass. Don't know why you disappear unless you go behind me. Okay. Do I need to go check in on Baldy? Do I need to check in on Baldy? Alright. Oh man. I'm gonna give this one more try. I don't know if my brain is equipped to properly handle what is happening. It's not complicated. Like, it's not. It's clearly not complicated. I can do it. That's not a problem. The problem is, will my sanity hold up? I don't hear anything. That is great.
It's mine.
I'm coming, Baldy. Hold on. Oh, okay. Oh, right. Not again. Oh.
Suffering noises.
Alright, one more time. That was, I don't know why I pressed it twice in a row. That was clearly my fault. So it's that grumbling. You hear that grumbling? That's him about to attack. Man, I'm good at that. Okay. This is weirdly well polished compared to the last one, and I'm actually impressed, because there's some things going on here that are clearly very well done, and that's cool. I don't think so. I don't think so. Oh, that's, well, that is a problem, but well, what do I do? The principal, I'll be put in detention if I... Okay, now don't look at him again! Oh god, principal, please!
I'll take that. It's mine.
Perfect. Man, I'm great. Goddamn, I'm good at this game. But do I want to be? Do I want to be? I don't hear any voice, but then again, I've kind of forgotten what the voice even sounds like. Principal. Oh, that's... Yep. Okay, it's pretty clear.
I'll take that. It's mine.
Hurry up. Hurry up. Oh, please. Not right now. I got a Baldy. Okay. Okay, so actually, you know, I'm doing okay. Can't really believe that I'm doing okay, but I am doing okay. Oh, 7 times. Oh, I did it. That's not the voice, is it? Is that the voice? I don't think that's the voice. I don't think that's the voice. Oh, that's the voice. Okay. Alright, I gotta go. Hurry up. Got him. Easy. Easy.
I'll take that. It's mine.
Oh, what? I was waiting. Oh, that's cheap. I'm going back. Got him. Oh. Oh. Easy, easy. Okay, this stuff is easy. This is nothing. I don't even need to go nowhere. Okay. I'm gonna wait for one more here. There we go. Easy. Oh, That's Baldy, alright. So thanks for making it obvious. Nice. Easy. It was actually not too bad. Once you get into flow, it was daunting with the sheer number of things to do. But yeah, no, this is not that bad. I got him. Oh god, oh god, oh god. Wait. Oh. Oh, man. Whoa, god. Whoa, Jesus, what's happening? Oh yeah, that's okay. Baldy's on the way, okay. Hold on, Baldy, hold on. There we go. Patience, Baldy. Patience, Baldwin. I'm going. Almost there, almost there.
I'll take that. It's mine now.
You can have it. One more here. Got it. That'll probably carry me over to the end of the night.
Wow, you won the game.
I did.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
However, there is still one more challenge I want you to try.
I don't want
It's
to.
super hard mode.
But
if
I don't.
you complete this mode, you'll get something special. Alright, good luck.
But I don't want to do super hard mode. But I don't want to do super hard mode. Wow. Wow. Is that a cock and balls? Lixian, censor that. That you can't show that on the internet. Oh man. All right. Great stuff. Okay. Ah. Good. How do you do? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I refuse to do it. But thank you everybody so much for watching. It was good to go back into the yonder years of Baldi's Basics. And also Five Nights at Freddy's. What a weird one. If you want to try super hard mode for yourself, link in the description. Go check it out right down there. I won't stop you, and I don't think anybody legally can. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye! Dude, I play games where I looks like my way out. Yeah. Welcome to the Heilwald Loophole. This game is fascinating to me. It's a PlayStation 1 style horror game, which should, you know, get a lot of attention in and of itself, but it actually hasn't gotten that many people playing it. Only like 100 or so reviews on Steam, but they're all glowing. They're all impeccable. They all say things like, as of writing my favorite indie horror game of all time. Beat it. Good visuals, interesting gameplay concept, very interesting story, killer sound design, phenomenal horror game, nice slasher, one of the best, perhaps the only time loop based PlayStation style horror games I've ever played. Unexpectedly good at straddling the line between terrifying, bizarre, and hilarious. So, I'm curious, right? Oh. Game lets you know when you've missed something. This is recommended. No hand holding here. You'll have to do some exploring. Given that it's a longer game, I'm going to do guided mode. Just because I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. Uh-huh. I don't know how you control that. I don't know what that's supposed to do. That sounded more like I was being birthed. It might be of note. There's a massive hole in the ceiling. Strange how it collapsed in exactly the spot where I was standing. That is weird. Huh. Uh-huh. Great. So... Alright. Huh. Okie dokie then. I'm here. I'm guessing the Heilwald loophole is referring to this concept where no one dies here and therefore do whatever you can to exploit that or make that rule law. I think anyway. Where am I? I wonder what they're storing here. We are of the same mind, you and I. Huh. 2 doors. Hi! Oh, no.
The talking sound is so weird.
What? Oh my god! Wait a minute!
Where are you talking?
What?
Where are you going? And then the talking is.
Oh my god!
What? What?
What the hell happened? Dr. Randolph was quite concerned about your behavior. You appeared paranoid and actively tried avoiding his aid. He plans on accommodating you in the prison temporarily. The prison? Why the prison? But
Well,
good,
he
this
is
is
in the
much
prison
less
now.
paranoia-inducing than where I was. Thank you for understanding my needs.
He really be like, you can't be like,
Anybody
I don't
getting
know,
vibes of presentable
5
liberty?
meters away from me. If
Oh.
not, I'm gonna stab you.
Oh. Yeah. The Heilwald Clinicum says goodbye to Fred. Okay, an article about the old chief doctor resigning. Sounds like he was quite beloved. Yeah, I'm sure he woos. Why am I here? Thank goodness papers rustle so loudly. Must be the wind rustling through this
The
place.
paper does rustle damn loudly.
I can see how that would be nice, just if the weather was a little better. Okay, well, that's a big door. Well, I am intrigued. I am more than intrigued. I am captivated. Well, that's all locked, so I guess I go this way. Hello?
Oh, I love the pull lever with the alarms blaring. How's the aircon now? It's working now.
Was that supposed to be just an alarm?
After
or...
they spent 1 hour
Oh.
changing it,
Weird.
saying that they needed drilling, but they
Is this
actually
gonna fall?
didn't.
Is this how I fall? What?
Nice loading screen.
Alright, I'm back. I've have looped.
Nice sounds, yeah, nice sound.
Could be interesting. Just a bunch of boxes.
It
That
could
wasn't
be
interesting at
interesting.
all. Massive hole in the ceiling. Why are the descriptions different? Okay, that's still locked, so that makes sense. Okay. Alright, so is he still gonna be standing? I wonder what their story is. Is he still gonna be standing, over yonder way? Oh. Bunch of empty syringes. Okay, well that's... Maybe there are unused ones around. Ah, man, I bet that's something that I need to know about. But at the same time... yeah. Okay, hey doctor. Hey, what's up? Oh, you know... I'm sorry. Alright, I'm following you really closely. Do you have a tail? What is going on there? What's this? Seems to be out of place. You damn right. What's that? What's that? You talking about the tail? Alright, I'll close it, don't worry. I am here. Okie dokie then. I'm here. Yes. Don't have a seat, please. Don't have a seat? Why would you do that? After running into Dr. Randolph, he offers you to help you out, although his suggested treatment is not quite what you imagine. He wants to remove your liver, obviously.
Obviously.
Oh. Oh.
What?
Did you
Oh,
take
I
it?
love the rustling
Welcome,
sound
Joseph
of the
Randolph.
documents.
He is to take the role of chief doctor. Apparently there were a lot of applicants. How did he
I
manage
am
to
not
get the job,
focused
I
on drawing
wonder?
right now.
He can remove a liver in 3 seconds flat. Like
Whoa.
some kind of a record. Oh. Well, that seems special. I choose to go in the scary vent. Not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
What?
And because I have a sneaking suspicion that my liver might get stolen if I do not. Oh, can I not go this way? Really? I feel like I could squeeze through there. Ooh. Ooh. Ah. Oh, good. We're back here again. Ah, of course it is.
It's a
Weird.
Kennedy code.
Alright.
I
Here
don't
go.
know shit.
This is fascinating. Items of knowledge 2 of 9. Wow. Again, it sounds more like a birthing than it does a collapsing. So there's got to be a way to get away from this doctor. Let me try the obvious. Yep. Oh.
Where are you going?
Where are you
Probably is
going?
not the correct. Almost definitely not the correct. Oh, maybe there was a way to like unlock this. Huh. What? I was almost certain I would be hit with a dead end. Okay, I hear him walking around the hall out there. There's gotta be a way that I could sneak around him. Ooh. Thank you for opening that door. Whatever this is. Is this helpful? More clutter. Damn, not helpful.
Where are you going?
Alright, this might take some doing. Where is he? I don't know. Where'd he go? Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Where is he? Oh frick. Oh frick. Might be of no. Good. This might be a good place to wait for him to go by. Oh, here he comes. Who? Who? Must have been a nightmare to go through. Yeah, not the thoughts I want right now. Oh. Empty syringes. God damn it. It's not what I'm looking for. Oh, I'm stressed. This is stressful. This is very stressful. Why is this so stressful? I don't know. It's just one dude. I play games where I looks like my way out. Yeah. Ah! Oh my god! Why would you do that to me? Why? I went through all of that just so you could hop on my back? Alright, fine, I'll do it again. There gotta be a way out of here. So I can slip past him pretty okay, but it seemed like he was not about me going towards that staircase. So there's gotta be other things that are lurking around the corners here. More secrets to see. Golden toilets. Something about that. Hello. Go away. Where are you going? Shut up also. Frick. Oh, frick. Oh, he's gonna walk in here. Oh, God. No. No! Okay, so you can hide from him pretty okay. Okay, that's good.
I like that the doctor is
Maybe
blind.
this is what I was supposed to do. I'm out of here, baby. So what's in his office? And I don't want to stick around too long because he'll be right back. What's this? What's this? Nothing. Good. What's this? Whoa! What is that? It's a plug. It's glued shut and taped shut.
Also deaf, yes.
What's
Also
going
deaf.
on? What in the world is that supposed to be? Oh, he's coming. Oh Lord, he coming. What is that?
It's the common condition of video games enemies. It sure is. It's also like the what do you call it? The older games where as long as you hide somewhere where the enemies can't see you, they immediately forget about you.
I don't want anyone going this way, I know, and I've been here, but this was locked.
You run into a locker right in front of them, they forget about you.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna be caught here.
Very amusing.
No! Where are you going? Shut up. Also, you're ugly. Oh my god, what is this? An unused syringe? I'm gonna get you. Oh yeah. This is how I do it, don't I? Yes! Yes!
Whoa. What is on his? Oh,
Got it.
he dropped a
That's what
keycard.
you get. That's what you get, so stay down.
Where
I
did
don't
he
care
go?
who you are. You're down.
Where did
So I'm
that
gonna go this
person
way,
go?
and I'm gonna go down these stairs, and you're not gonna wake up. Looks like my way out. Oh yeah, it is. Because I got this. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. While scouring through the office's storage room, you discover some leftover anesthetics. You don't care if they're expired. All you want to do is get rid of Dr. Randolph and whatever sick treatment he has in mind for you. Thus, you manage to escape into the sick ward. Thanks. That was shockingly stressful. What? I'm guessing that was
There's more.
probably just like a tutorial level. But still, it was incredibly stressful, and I don't know why. Okay. I won't go back. I shan't go back. I refuse to go back. Can I leave? Home? Home? This is not home. That's not home. That's not home. Oh, boy. Alright, sure looks inviting. Oh, this guy's an idiot.
Tutorial.
This doesn't look inviting at all.
It's raining.
Why am I getting Cry
It's
of
raining where
Fear
you're at?
vibes? I haven't thought of Cry of Fear in a long time. Hi. How are you?
Tutorial. You see he talked about Cry of Fear, and I got reminded that there's Layers of Fear 2023 now.
Yep, that's bad. Krober? Krober. I like Krober.
Krober.
Another plug. Great. Yeah.
No.
I don't get it.
It's sealed
I
with
don't get
tapes.
I
How
don't
strong is that
understand
tape?
anything about that.
Layer of Fear was never
God,
on
I
your
gotta
radar.
revisit
I
Cry of
played
Fear
it
someday.
once. Like
I remember that I never got the
when I
actual
first
ending,
started streaming.
like the true ending in that game, because I just didn't
I played it once,
wasn't motivated enough to go through it all over
and
again.
it was
Man, that
not
would be a crazy
scary.
one.
And then I saw that there was Layers of Fears 2, but the first one wasn't scary,
just
so I
bad
ignored
vibes.
it. And I didn't know that there
This
would be a
is nothing
third
but
one that
bad
came out.
vibes. What? Oh, hey! Don't! I got the doors closed. I did not. Oh, that's not working! It's not working! Why are you so
Why?
stompy?
Yeah, why is the enemy so stompy?
Oh, I'm going for it. Oh no! Close! Oh,
Was that the
no!
Pac-Man one?
Where did you come from?
I
Was
have
there
no
any
idea.
point? No, there wasn't. Oh, you okay? It's so filthy. Yep. Yep.
Actually have no idea.
Okay. Horrible. Oh, must be important. The reception. Oh, she's stomping. Oh god. Oh god. Ugh.
That's really stompy.
Oh, what's up with your head? Oh, okay, bye. Guess she was sensitive about it. Okay, if that's locked and that's locked and you're there. Ugh. Don't come this way. Where are you? Oh. I'm gonna run for it. Oh, bad idea. What is over here? Bathroom.
Bad idea.
Oh, could be interesting. What is that? What is that? Oh no! Close it! No, no! Oh, no! 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 I'm pooping! Oh my god, I'm pooping! I'm going for it. She's stompy! Oh, God, what's this? Oh, what's this? Oh, I already been here. Have I been here? I've been here. Yeah, I've been here. Okay. Alright, well, I don't know what to do about that. That's horrible. That's very horrible. But I have a crowbar. Is that gonna help me in any way? Maybe over here? Like if I take the crowbar and do something with it? I don't have an inventory, do I? No. I won't go back. I shan't go back. I've done all this. I've gone that way. I've gone in here.
I don't like the
really
BGM
see
in this
anything
game.
here. Do I have to like give her a sedative? I don't know if I have a sedative. I don't know where to get a sedative. There's gotta be another sedative or something around here. Alright, you know what? Just, oh my god! Whoa! Heideltraut takes good care of her patients, at least she likes to say so, but seeing you run around her ward with an unwieldy and dangerous crowbar was too much. She deems electric shock therapy a reasonable treatment. Does she deem that? Well, it's a good thing she deems that. She deems real nice.
She deems real nice.
Maybe I needed to get got. Maybe. Oh, I just get to sit in a waiting room. Oh, though that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. There's an invisible wall. War tongue. I think it means maintenance. Yep. Sure. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh, wait! Don't do it! I don't want to be doing it! Don't do it!
Oh. Wow, where is that?
I'm not gonna not follow someone, I think. Alright, I'll be right here. Well, this is going swimmingly. Unfortunately, I think that might be all the time I have for this life. This is a longer game. I believe it clocks in probably around 3 or hello. I waited patiently. Hello. Oh, good. So I'm going to see what this is all about, and then I'm sure everything will be fine. You have such long arms. I find that to be... Oh my god. All right, you got it. Oh, yep. I'm ready. Zap me up. Yep. I'm cured. The last thing you see is Anne's twisted, grinning face staring right at you as he pumps high voltage through your entire body. Is this the end? You kind of wish it was, but alas, there is more. More? Ah, I see. So this is where I am. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. This is so much more than I thought it would be. I do feel a strong compulsion to keep playing it, which maybe I will. There's a paper rustling over here, which is useful, I think. A research paper published by Joseph Randolph. Benefits of the surgical remover of the Eker. Don't really understand what he's talking about in this paper. Does make it sound like it's the next big thing. I just want to see if this dumps me back at the very beginning, because that means I would. Fascinating. Weird. I think I'm gonna leave this here for now.
I went
and
out
at
for one
some
thing
point
and
in the
bought
future,
so
I'm gonna
many
pick
other
this
things,
up,
but I didn't buy the
definitely
one
think
thing
it's
I went out
fries.
for.
It's fascinating.
You
So thank
forgot
everybody so
to
much
buy
for
the
watching.
one
Let me
thing
know
that
what
you
thought
went
down in the
out
comments
for.
below, and if you want to see more of it, let me know down there. Thank you.
Distractions.
And as always, I will see you
Classic.
in the next video. Bye-bye!
Those fake ads really drive you mad, huh? The game looks
What the hell?
Today's story is about a crime so notorious it has been dubbed the crime of the century. But the
crime
reason
of the
for its
century.
notoriety has less to do with the crime itself and more to do with who committed it. But before we get into
Yes, you're gonna
that
forget your
story,
phone while you're
if you're a
holding
fan
it.
of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right
Definitely
place,
didn't
because that's all
happen
we
to
do.
me
We
before.
upload
No, no,
once a
no,
week.
no. Why
So,
would that
if that's of
happen to
interest
me?
you,
No, no, no.
please downgrade the like button's Netflix account so they're
No,
forced
no,
to
no,
sit
no.
through all the unskippable ads. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Oh, I put it to the wrong place.
On the evening of Wednesday, May 21st, 1924, a man named Jacob Franks walked up the steps to his mansion, and right as he went to open his door, his butler opened it up, welcomed him inside, and Jacob smiled at the butler and stepped in. Jacob had just spent a long day at his office in Chicago, Illinois, doing a big real estate deal, and now he was just happy to be home with his wife and his 3 kids. Jacob was an incredibly successful business person who had made a name for himself first in the early 1900s when he ran a bank that specialized in giving out these enormous loans to gamblers. But it wasn't until he was named
I'm
the
going to
president
think I need to
of the
pee while
Rockford Watch
pee.
Company, and he expanded into real estate, that he
And dream
became
of sleep while
outrageously wealthy.
sleeping.
His fortune in
Honestly,
today's dollars would have been around
can't say
$70
that it
million.
didn't happen to me before.
But now that Jacob was so well established in the business world in Chicago, he was trying to make a more conscious effort to spend more time at home with his wife and kids. And so as soon as he walked past his butler into his mansion, he hung up his hat and his jacket, and he went to find his wife, Flora, to tell her about an idea he had for a trip for that upcoming weekend. But when Jacob found Flora, she was not remotely interested in talking about their weekend plans, because Flora was very worked up about their youngest son, Bobby. Bobby, who was 14 years old, was supposed to come home right after school, but it was now 6 p.m. and he still hadn't shown up, and she had no idea where he was. And Jacob's reaction to this news was just to feel kind of aggravated. Bobby was generally a really good kid. He was a student at a prestigious boys' school right down the road, and his teacher was convinced that Bobby was the smartest kid in his entire grade. Bobby was a member of the school's
You're gonna step
debate
out of your
team,
room and forget why.
regularly
No, no, no.
praised
You're
the
gonna
other kids,
step
and
into your
Bobby was just a
room
natural leader
because
and
you
very
needed
hardworking
something,
and
but then
kind.
forget
But
why.
Bobby could also be fairly irresponsible sometimes, specifically in terms of coming home on time. This was not the first time that Bobby had not come home by curfew. So Jacob told Flora, don't worry about it. This is something Bobby does. He likely lost track of time. And as Jacob and Flora are having this discussion, Bobby's older brother came into the room and suggested to his dad, Jacob, that perhaps Bobby was across the street at Richard's house. Richard was Bobby's cousin, playing tennis on their private court. Richard and Bobby were quite close, even though they were 4 years apart. Richard was 18, Bobby was 14, but they really bonded over tennis, and so that was something they did all the time. And so Jacob said he would go across the street and see if Bobby was there, and he also told his wife, Flora, to just continue to call around town and see if anybody knew where Bobby might be. And so Jacob left his mansion and began walking across the street towards Richard's family's mansion to see if his son was there. Now, this neighborhood that Jacob lived in was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods really in the entire country, but definitely within Chicago's city limits. It was called South Kenwood, and basically imagine a street where every house is a huge mansion, and every mansion is home to some business tycoon or famous person, and all the families who lived in this neighborhood had a full staff of maids and butlers and drivers and fleets of private cars. I mean,
Wow.
these people who lived in South Kenwood were literally the richest of the rich. And so Jacob, he gets
Super
across the
rich.
street, he's standing in front of Richard's family's mansion, and he looks around the side, and he can see the private tennis court where his son and Richard would always play, but it's totally vacant, and in fact, the house is just totally quiet. No one's home. When Jacob got back to his own home, he found his wife pacing around in the parlor looking really concerned, and so Jacob immediately asked her, what'd you learn? What's going on? And she would tell Jacob that she had spoken to one of Bobby's friends who told her that Bobby had umpired a baseball game after school and had left to walk back home at around 5 p.m. The school and the baseball field where Bobby would have been was only about 3 blocks away from their home. And now it was 6:30 p.m. So it's been an hour and a half since Bobby had supposedly began his walk home. And so by now he certainly should be here, but of course he wasn't. At this point, Jacob went from feeling aggravated with his son to being concerned for his son's safety, despite the fact that he's thinking, okay, well, my son is likely somewhere in this neighborhood in South Kenwood, one of the safest, richest, best places in the country. He's got to be okay, but I really want to find him. And so Jacob would call one of his very close friends who lived in this neighborhood, who also happened to be a former state senator, and he asked him to come over and basically look around the neighborhood for Bobby. When the state senator friend arrived at Jacob's house, the two men left and began walking down the street lined with mansions, making their way towards the school where Bobby supposedly had been umpiring. And when they got there, they saw there was no baseball game happening, and the school was dark and closed for the night. But Jacob and his friend decided that, maybe it was possible that after umpiring this game, when Bobby had begun his walk home, maybe he had taken a detour into the school to get something, and then perhaps the doors got shut and locked on him. And so Jacob and his friend went to the school and looked for a way to basically break into the school. And sure enough, they would find an open window, they'd open it up, they would climb inside, and they would search the entire school, but Bobby was not in there. At this point, Jacob was really starting to panic. His friend was trying to calm him down, but Jacob is now thinking, something is terribly wrong with my son. And so the two men actually ran from the school back to Jacob's house, and when
They
they
call
went
the
inside,
police
Jacob
first thing.
immediately
Right,
called out to his wife to see
shouldn't
if
you
maybe
call
she had located Bobby.
the police?
But when he called Flora's name, there was no response. And so Jacob and his friend, they run inside and they make their way towards the parlor, which is where they had last seen Flora before they left. And when they walked in there, they found Flora lying on the ground, totally lifeless, with the phone off the hook right next to her hand. And so Jacob and the senator, they run over and they begin shaking Flora, and suddenly she wakes up with a gasp, and she looks up at Jacob and just begins sobbing hysterically. And after Jacob finally calmed her down, she would tell him that after they had left to go to the school, she had received a phone call. And at first, she thought it was Bobby calling to check in. But when she answered it, it wasn't Bobby, it was a man's voice she didn't recognize, who told her that Bobby had been kidnapped. He was safe for now, but if they went to police, something terrible would happen to him. This mystery man also told Flora that they would be in touch soon with more information, and then they hung up. And Flora had been so overwhelmed by what she was told that she had fainted, and that was why they found her on the ground. That night, Jacob, Flora, and the state senator friend stayed up late going over, what they should do. Of course, they wanted to go to police, but this felt like a credible threat that Bobby could be harmed if they did that. And so they just went back and forth over how to handle this horrible situation. But by 2 a.m., they had made a decision. The state senator had some close friends and connections in the police department, and so they decided that they would go talk to the police, but they would swear them to secrecy so the kidnapper or kidnappers wouldn't know the police were investigating. And so, a few hours later, when the police department opened up, Jacob and the state senator friend went to the police, they spoke to the highest ranking officer who was sworn to secrecy, and then that morning, the police would begin a quiet investigation into Bobby's kidnapping. At the same time this investigation was beginning, on the morning of May 22nd, 1924, a man named Morton D. Ballard drove through downtown Chicago in a luxury car known as a Willis Knight. He pulled this luxury car into a parking lot right next to a rental car company, and after parking the car, Morton got out, he went inside of the shop, and he handed the keys over to the clerk behind the desk. The clerk would ask Morton, how did it go with your rental car? And Morton would say, oh, it was perfect, went totally fine. After that, Morton thanked the clerk, he turned around and walked outside where another luxury car was waiting for him, being driven by his good friend, Lewis Mason. And once Morton had climbed inside, the two men smiled and drove off and disappeared into traffic. That same morning, Jacob and Flora received a letter from the kidnapper or kidnappers demanding $10,000 in small unmarked bills, and if they gave this money over, they would get their son back. And immediately, Jacob went to the bank and got the money, but before he could actually deliver the money to the kidnappers at the location they had specified in this letter, the police, who were quietly investigating, discovered a clue that would break the case wide open. It would take over a week to unravel this bizarre clue, but it all started to come together when the police brought in Morton D. Ballard and Lewis Mason for questioning. Here is the shocking story that detectives were finally able to piece together about what happened to Bobby Franks. On May 7th, 1924, so 2 weeks before Bobby went missing, Morton D. Ballard walked into a hotel in Chicago called the Morrison and rented room 1031. He would tell the front desk that he wanted them to hold his mail for him, and over the next couple of days, Morton would come in and he would get his mail from the front desk, but he didn't appear to ever actually go up to his room. Finally, a suspicious maid at the Morrison Hotel, who had been going into room 1031 every day to clean it, only to discover that Morton was not in there and the room was totally untouched and clean already, she went in one morning and saw Morton was not in there, and she would actually just open up one of Morton's suitcases that he had left inside.
Oh.
And instead
How
of the
did I
suitcase
appear there?
containing clothes or toiletries, it just contained a bunch of random library books. As it happened, after this maid found this strange suitcase full of books, Morton stopped coming to the hotel. He stopped getting his mail, he did not claim his luggage, and he didn't pay the bill. He just kind of vanished. On May 9th, so just a couple of days after Morton first booked that room at the Morrison Hotel, Morton also opened a bank account in Chicago. He also made his first appearance at that car rental company where he asked for the Willis Knight car.
Was the maid
rental company
suspicious
would
or
not
was she
just let
suspicious?
anybody take a
She
Willis
was
Knight car.
suspicious.
You needed a reference to show that you were someone who could pay for this type of
Whichever
vehicle.
way you
And so
interpret it.
Morton's friend, Lewis Mason, would give him that reference and allow him to rent the Willis Knight car. About a week and a half later, on May 21st, so the day Bobby went missing, Morton and Lewis were driving around South Kenwood in their Willis Knight car when they spotted Bobby by himself walking down the road. Now, Lewis recognized Bobby, and he knew that Bobby was an incredible tennis player, and Lewis had a question for Bobby about a particular tennis racket. And so Lewis, who was in the front seat of the car, told Morton, who was driving, to pull over so Lewis could talk to Bobby. And so Morton pulled over, Lewis rolled his window down, he called over to Bobby, Bobby came over, and before long, Lewis and Bobby were talking about this tennis racket, and then when that conversation naturally wrapped up, Lewis offered Bobby a ride the rest of the way home, because that was where Bobby was walking to when they stopped him. And so Lewis climbed into the back seat, Morton stayed in the driver's seat, and Bobby climbed inside and sat in the front seat. And then once those two were situated, Morton pulled away from the curb and began driving towards Bobby's house. And as they were driving to Bobby's house, Bobby just kind of continued talking about this tennis racket because that was the thing they were talking about. And as he was mid-sentence, Lewis from the back seat reached into his pocket, pulled out a chisel, and then lunged forward and began smashing Bobby in the back of the head over and over again with this chisel. And as Bobby is screaming in pain and trying to protect himself, Lewis lunges forward, grabs Bobby, drags him into the back seat, and then holds him down, pulls a rag out of his
He
pocket,
suddenly
and
became
jams
louder,
it
or is
into
it just
Bobby's
me?
throat. And then he closes Bobby's mouth and holds it shut until Bobby goes still. After that, Lewis kind of grimaced at all of Bobby's blood all over him, and he kind of pushed Bobby down onto the floorboards below, and then Lewis calmly climbed back into the front seat and sat down, and meanwhile, Morton has not remotely reacted to what's just happened. This is just business as usual. Morton and Lewis did not go to Bobby's house, but instead drove towards Indiana. And on their drive to Indiana, they would stop at a roadside restaurant and eat hot dogs and root beers with their car parked right near this restaurant with Bobby's body just totally exposed, laying out on the floorboards of the back seat. Morton and Lewis would eventually get into Indiana, and they would head to this particular forest that Morton was familiar with because he was a bird watcher and often came out here. And when they got to this forest, they parked in this clearing, they got out, they checked on Bobby and confirmed that he was dead. So they pulled him out, they stripped all of his clothes off of him, they rolled him up in a rug, and then they dragged him over to this drainage pipe that sat underneath some railroad tracks in this swampy area, and they jammed him inside of it. And then they got back in their car, they drove back to Chicago, at which point Morton called Bobby's mother, Flora, and informed her that her son was kidnapped but alive, even though he wasn't, and don't call the police, we'll be in touch soon. That night, Morton and Lewis would burn all of the clothes they had stripped off of Bobby. They would also clean the interior of their Willis Knight rental car, and then they would play a game of cards together before going to bed. The next day, May 22nd, so the same day that police began their quiet investigation into Bobby's kidnapping, Morton and Lewis would send that letter to Jacob and Flora demanding $10,000 for the safe return of Bobby. But unfortunately, before Lewis and Morton could claim their ransom money, Bobby's body was discovered. In fact, that day he was discovered. A walker was cutting through the woods in Indiana and saw Bobby in the pipe. And so when Morton and Lewis realized that, the jig is up, the family's never going to pay for their son because he's dead, they just returned their Willis Knight rental
My
car
mom wanna
and went
eat
back to their
Subway.
normal lives as if
You're
nothing
home,
had
welcome
happened.
home.
But unbeknownst to him,
Welcome
Morton
home.
had accidentally dropped his eyeglasses right next to Bobby's body when they dumped him in the woods in Indiana. And Morton's eyeglasses were very unique. In fact, there was only
Very
one store in
unique.
the world that sold this particular kind of eyeglasses. And so when detectives got the call about Bobby's body
Subway.
being found, they would also find these
Wanna eat
glasses. And that was the
Subway.
big clue. Because these
I have to
glasses
order
led
for her
detectives to the
because,
store where they
you know,
were sold, and
she
the
don't
owner
have,
of the store was able to say that, yep,
internet
those
banking.
particular glasses were sold to Morton. And when detectives went to Morton, Morton immediately pointed the finger at Lewis, saying
it
that
delivery?
Morton didn't do anything to
It
Bobby,
is, okay.
Lewis did. But about a week later, on May 31st, both Morton and Lewis would confess to police that they murdered Bobby. But far
Damn.
more shocking than what Morton and Lewis had done was who they were. Because Morton and Lewis were not their real names. The two men who killed Bobby Franks were rich kids just like Bobby who lived in South Kenwood. They created two fake names, Morton D. Ballard and Lewis Mason, and then they booked room 1031 at the Morrison Hotel. Now, they had no intention of actually staying at this hotel, and so they just left that suitcase full of books inside of the room to make it appear like they were staying there. But in reality, the only reason they booked
She
that
wanna
room
eat
is they needed
teriyaki
a physical
chicken.
mailing address that was connected to
Chimkyung.
their fake personas. And so after booking this room, they began sending mail to Morton D. Ballard and Lewis Mason at the Morrison Hotel, room 1031. And then after collecting that mail, which served as a sort of proof of legal name and address, they were able to open a bank account in Chicago. They dumped some money into that, and then again, they used their proof of legal name and address to rent that Willis Knight car, and then used money from their phony bank account to pay for it. And then once they had their luxury car, it was time to go kill. In reality, Morton was actually a 19-year-old prodigy.
Why do
named
they not
Nathan
have
Leopold. He
sweet
spoke
corn?
5 languages, he had already
Always.
graduated from college, and he was a nationally respected ornithologist, which is someone who studies birds. Nathan's IQ
Birds.
was so high, it literally couldn't be measured. His father was the president
What?
of a very successful steamship company, and Nathan was planning to attend Harvard University in the fall to get yet another college degree. And Lewis was
Wow,
actually
smarts.
18-year-old Richard Loeb, who was Bobby's cousin and one of his best friends. Bobby and Richard played tennis together all the time in Richard's private court, which is where Bobby's father went first to go looking for his son. Like Nathan, Richard was also a genius. He was the youngest person ever to have graduated from the University of Michigan. He graduated at 17 years old. And to celebrate the occasion,
The more
Richard's
he
father,
talks, the less
who in
invested
today's
I am in
dollars
the
was
story.
worth about
I used to listen to him a
$157
lot.
million. He was a retired
Recently,
vice
not
president
so
for the
much.
major retail store Sears. He bought Richard a custom golf course. He built him his own golf course. That was his graduation present. And at the time of Bobby's murder, Richard
Okay,
actually
about all these
enrolled at the
redundant
University of
details.
Chicago's law
But
school,
he
studying
needs to
become a
pad the
lawyer.
time.
Nathan and Richard would very proudly tell investigators
It's all
that
about
they didn't
the
kill
time.
Bobby to get money out of his parents. Nathan and Richard were
For all
fabulously
these,
wealthy. The money meant nothing. Instead, they had come up with this
alert
scheme and killed Bobby because of their belief in the philosopher Nietzsche's concept of supermen. Men whose superiority
Superman.
allows them to rise above all ordinary rules, ethics, and laws. Basically, Nathan and Richard believed they were so much better than everybody else in the world that if they wanted to kill someone, they should be able to. And Bobby seemed like a pretty easy target. After Nathan and Richard confessed, they were put under arrest, but a chauffeur was allowed to come to the police station and drop off silk pajamas for them to wear in custody.
Silk pajamas.
And instead of being held in a cell, they were allowed to stay in a hotel. But ultimately, they both were sentenced
Wow,
to life
the
in prison.
rich
Bobby's family
rich
never
people
recovered from his
bullshit.
murder, and his father, Jacob, would die just 4 years after his son died. As for Nathan, he would be murdered in prison in 1936 by another inmate. And as for Richard, he would serve his time and get paroled and then die of natural causes in 1971. Today, the murder of Bobby Franks is often referred to as the crime of the century.
The crime of the century, man.
So,
Okay. Do we have any other things to watch? Crime of the century. Really now? Mark, why would you watch all his recent videos? I caught up with his videos today. You know what? This one looks interesting. Oh my god, laughing,
If you
so
like the video,
scary.
make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos
I
like
just put on the
this, Late
FNAF
Night Hikers, what is
Revisited
the creepiest
playlist and
thing
that
you've seen
takes
while
care
hiking?
of my whole day's worth
I
of
was walking
content.
around my neighborhood alone once, enjoying the night air and watching the stars. There was this little pond near my house. with a
I
wooded
tend
area
to
that had
watch
trees,
his
a bench and a rope swing that
3
went out over
scary
the water.
games
I
because
sat
those
down
are
on the bench
kinda
to look at the stars, and I
interesting.
heard
Some of the
some
games are
rustling
kinda
off to my
interesting.
right, towards the trees. Bears were not uncommon where I'm from,
Okay,
so I
let's
took out my
try to
flashlight
do
and
this.
shone it around over there. I didn't see anything. It freaked me out, so I kept my flashlight on and my senses aware, but I stayed on the bench to mull over my thoughts and watch the sky some more. I don't know why I did that, cause that's typical horror movie shit. Anyway, a few minutes pass and I hear nothing more, so I lean back into the bench and start to relax a bit. I'm staring up at the sky with my flashlight pointed downwards, so as not to create any light pollution, when I notice something in the tree in my peripheral vision. I couldn't tell what it was, but the branch was swaying slightly, and the rustling noise was back too. I immediately sat up and stared at it, but hadn't shown my flashlight at it yet in case of pissing off some huge bird or something else. I don't think I've ever been that scared. I remember my heart was beating so fast and I could taste blood. I stared at it for what seemed like forever, and it slowly stopped moving. But the shape was still there. Bears do climb trees sometimes, so I was hesitant to run away in case that's what it was. So I just kept staring at it. After a while I mustered up the little raisin-esque
I can watch
cojones
that
to shine
playlist
my
every day
goddamn
without
light
getting
at the
tired of
tree.
it. Wow.
It was a man.
You must love
A
FNAF.
ducking man. In the tree. Crouched in the tree like some silent, naked monkey. He had no expression on his face, but his eyes were open really, really wide. When my light landed on him, he started to move like he was going to come down, but I didn't stick around to see if he did. I jumped the bench and ran for the ducking hills. I ran to my house and around to the back door and locked myself in without looking back once. I went around and made sure every window and door was locked. I even checked the attic. I never go out alone anymore. Usually, it's what I hear. Large, fallen, branches snapping just out of sight of my headlamp. Or waking up an hour later and hearing steps and leaves rustling, but too exhausted and fearful to inspect or want to know. Probably nothing important anyway. One time I returned to my car after a late night hike with friends and my SUV was covered in foot/hand/paw prints. They were just so large and even dragged a little in the dust. It was on/near a large military base in the mountains. I think some local enlisted may have made them to scare us. But it was just so well done. Pretty scary for all of us because it's what you'd imagine the Blair Witch would do. No animal did it. A few friends and I went on an overnight hike in the Rockies behind our little town a few years back when I was in HS. Our camping site was pretty far up there and it was getting dark. The spot we were at was nestled in a grove of trees secluded from the wind and elements, so we decided to stop there for the night. The four of us built a little fire and ate dinner, then just talked for a few hours. Then all of a sudden my friend leaps forward and douses the fire with our emergency water, plunging us into complete darkness. Needless to say, the rest of us were pretty pissed as there was no reason for him to do this. He quickly shushes us and we realize he is absolutely terrified. Like so scared he couldn't even speak or move. The rest of us managed to get
They
a
will
few word out
FNAF
of him,
games
and he
with
tells us to
Resident
look up on the
whatever it
ridge
is
where we
now.
should have been camping. It was pretty far up, so it was kind of hard to see
only
at first,
watched
but that sight
FNAF
will haunt me for the rest of my life.
until
There was a fire,
which
a big
one?
like a bonfire sort of
I
thing.
think I
Around
caught
the
up
fire were
to
several
before
figures
the
moving in a slow
VR
circle.
game came out.
They were humanoid but not quite, and they had arms and legs like people, but something just seemed different about them that I can't really explain. Almost like the limbs were too long and skinny or something, but maybe not. Anyway, these figures just moved around the fire in a really slow circle over and over again. My one friend claims he could hear them singing something, but I don't remember anything. Importantly, there was one standing off to the side a little ways, leaning with his arm on a tree branch above his head. It really creeped us out, but we were able to sleep it off. We figured it was a scout troop having a camp or something. Morning came and we finished off our hike to the peak, and on our way down we passed the place we saw the figures and decided to check out the camp. It was completely deserted. It was obvious that there had been a fire and there were footprints everywhere. Inside the fire pit was a small mound of charred animal bones, probably chipmunk, and a pile of 4 or 5 rodent skulls that had been burned. Creepy, right? Then we look over at where the one figure was standing. Blood. Not a lot, but enough to be of concern or anything, but enough to be creepy. Then we see the tree branch he was casually leaning against. It was well over any of our heads, and I'm over 6 foot. That would mean that in order for the figure to lean against it like he was, he would need to be at least 7 feet tall. Needless to say, we got off that mountain very fast and I have never been up there again. We called the Fish and Wildlife Rangers and told them what we saw. They said it was probably just a bunch of kids messing around and not to worry about it. It might have been just that, and we let our imaginations run wild, but all 4 of us swear to this day we all saw the same thing, and it didn't look like a bunch of kids in the dark. I don't believe in ghost or the supernatural, but those mountains still scare the shit out of me, and I will never go back there again. I walk at night in my rural
It's
area.
a real sim.
I've encountered black bears,
I have no idea
coyotes,
which one the VR
bobcats,
is.
angry deer, and everything on down.
Where it
with
should
no
have
real
ended.
concern. But the creepiest
Are you going to
encounter
watch
was a little
the
black pickup truck with
FNAF
rainbow and
movie?
unicorn stickers. Bubblegum pop music blaring, and it smelled like cotton candy when it passed me. First time it passed me, it swerved to hit me. I jumped out of the way easily. I thought nothing of it really, just figured they were startled by seeing me at night with my reflective gear. The truck circled back and comes at me again. I saw it coming this time and grabbed my dog up just in time to jump into a ditch. I heard little girl laughter, high-pitched and maniacal. The tiny truck circled back for a third go at me, but by then I was hiding in my neighbor's shrubbery. I watched it slowly drive down the road, hearing giggling as it passed me. Fortunately, it kept on going and I made it home just fine. I was camping and some of the group had gone off on a late-night stroll. After a while, me and a friend got bored and decided to go look for them. It was pretty much rolling grassland hills with few trees out there, so we figured it wouldn't be hard. It was also unearthly quiet, other than the occasional distant owl or coyote sounds, so we were whispering and being very chill. There was pretty good moon, so we hadn't brought lights either. Anyway, I finally see someone standing under a tree on the crest of this hill, so I go up there first. I call out quietly and don't get a response. Again, no response. Kinda annoyed, I just strut up there, but I'm realizing something looks weird about this person I've been seeing. They're holding their arms over their head and the proportions aren't right. but I think that was all kinda subconscious, because I didn't do anything different until I got close enough to see that it wasn't a person at all, but a ducking coyote that someone had flayed and strung up to the tree by the limbs like some kind of totem. I literally fell backwards in shock. Turns out the woman who owned the property was no fan of coyotes coming after her livestock. She also woke us all up in the middle of the night once with sustained AR-15 fire. Like 20 shots. Someone who lived near there just said, oh, she must have found a whole pack of them. Go back to sleep. When I was younger and stupider and going to college in the North Georgia mountains, my friends and I would go night hiking a lot on the trails near campus. I got pretty familiar with the area, and being out in the wilderness at night in general,
Depends if
which
it's good
probably
or
made me
even
too
halfway
confident.
decent.
One night the full moon was out, and the weather was perfect.
The
so
trailer, I
visibility was
saw the
crazy good.
trailer and
Everything
I
was
was
basically
like,
washed in dim blue light.
I don't
I was
know if
slightly
I'm
stoned
even
and
interested.
feeling adventurous, and I love doing fun stuff alone, so I decided to go enjoy a night hike by myself. I took a flashlight, but this was around 2002, so no cell phone. I chose a super easy trail that was mostly flat / maybe a mile loop, in pretty secluded area, but not exactly a national park or anything, very rural area. I didn't even need my flashlight for most of it, and just hiked in the moonlight. It was actually a really cool / beautiful experience at first. At some point I started feeling uneasy, and maybe a millisecond later I heard a man's voice. It was coming from a good distance ahead of me, somewhere off in the woods, maybe from the right side of the trail. He was crying. I'm honestly an empathetic person, and 99.9% of the time I hear someone crying I want to comfort / help them in some way, but this time I felt sick in the stomach, like a dry panic attack, if that makes sense. I remember coming very close to calling out to him, because my brain was trying to tell me he might be hurt, which was the only reason I hesitated, but it was like my body shut my voice down before I could say anything, and I knew I had to stay very quiet. He was sobbing like he'd just found out a loved one had died, but also gibbering, and almost babbling, like he was less than a person. There was a shrillness to it, under his crying, like he was holding back a scream, but perpetually, on and on, as if he'd been doing it all night. I remember it vividly, and my spine is tingling like crazy even as I write this. It's hard to explain, but I knew deep down he wasn't right in the head, and nothing good would happen if he realized I was listening. I went back the way I came. It was like I had tunnel hearing, and the only sound in the world was that crying. I was hyper aware of everything else around me, and beyond paranoid that I would snap a branch, or snag my boot on something. I worried the man's crying would get louder if I wasn't paying razor sharp attention, getting closer, or turn into an outraged crazy person scream. Thankfully it just faded the further I got from it, and I made it back to my car. Still, I was convinced some wild-eyed hermit was going to rush out of the forest and bite me to death, right up to the second I locked my doors and got the duck out of there. I finally had the rest of my panic attack on the drive back. I managed to park back at campus, and I just sat in the car and collected myself. Adrenaline is ducking powerful. I have never felt a shred of guilt about leaving the guy crying out in the woods in the dark. I know I was slightly stoned, but slightly is the key word there. I'm convinced to this day I was in very real danger that night. But sometimes I get that same sick feeling deep down, whenever I wonder what might have happened if the moon been less bright, or if I'd been more responsible, and I decided to use my flashlight even once. He'd have seen me for sure. My girlfriend and I had driven down an old dirt road that ran beside a lake on one side with mountains on the other. We were looking for unexplored territory to hike in. The dirt road became a trail and eventually was swallowed up entirely by the forest. Once the path became impassable by car, we got out and hiked for quite some time and began making our way back to the car as the sun was going down. It was a challenge getting the car turned around, but I finally managed and we were off. It was slow going as it was a shitty road and getting dark fast. Suddenly we came to fork in the path that hadn't been visible coming the other way. Neither of us had any idea whether to go right or left, so I just picked randomly, hoping that both would end up taking us back to the main road. As we rounded a small curve in the road, our headlights fall upon a man dragging a large hockey duffel bag off the trail into the woods. As soon as the lights hit him, he just froze completely still. Driving past him felt like an eternity because we couldn't have been doing more than 5 miles an hour, due to the shitty road. My girlfriend and I didn't say a word to each other until we were well past him, at which point we were like, WTF was that? And then the road ended. Just like where we had stopped the first time, the forest had swallowed up this part of the road. We were going to have to turn around and drive by the man with the human-sized duffel bag again. I told my girlfriend to buckle up and hold on tight because at the first sign of trouble I was going to gun it. We came to the spot where the man was and he was nowhere to be seen. We eventually made it to the right path and got the duck out of there. The weirdest thing about it was that there wasn't a vehicle anywhere near this guy for 50 miles in either direction. We would have seen it if there had been. We'd traveled as far as possible both ways and there just wasn't a place to pull off of the road. How the hell did he get there? Where was he going? What was in the bag? I am an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by what I believe was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how it did, and it was not a normal wolf as they can't comfortably run on two legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing. I can elaborate further if you wish. This happened around June or July of 2007, I believe. I was around 17 years old and more cocky then, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in NW, Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin or at least by the bonfire by the beach, because of bears, wolves, and cougars. One of the creepiest things was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach, and at night you always felt like you were being watched from that tree line. But during the day the woods always seemed normal, not so creepy, that is until this incident. So this happened somewhere between 1200 to 1400. Me and my cousin were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo, he was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage and our battle took us about 200 meters into about a third of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point and were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail talking and he was maybe 10 feet from me. When I decided to mess with him, I shushed him and said we're being watched. He froze. Then I realized the woods were dead quiet and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line and the other edge of the clearing from left to right when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds, but it wasn't normal. This wolf was on two legs crouching next to a tree with its arm grasping the tree, grasping with a clawed hand. It had reddish-brown fur. I told my cousin that we have to go and next thing I know he is sprinting and I look back at Wolfie who had locked on and sprinted a few steps on 2 feet and then I turned and ran when it looked like Wolfie was dropping to all fours. It charged us and sounded right on our asses barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. What stuck with me the most was the sheer size. Wolfie appeared to be nearly 7 tall when upright, and that where it should have had front paws it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know they can't sprint on 2 legs, nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on 2 legs. The closest
I want to watch Iron Lung. Me too. I want to watch Iron Lung too. The one who made the animatronics were the ones who then made the Muppets.
With the dogs just to relax. This walk would usually take an hour and a bit.
I didn't know that.
This one year in winter we
but
had
that
a very
sounds
large
cool as
collection of
hell.
dead trees in the back paddock that we had decided to burn. Started the fire in the morning and let it burn all day. Every so often I'd go and check that it was okay. So it get to night and around 9 p.m. I decide to go for my walk and check on the fire. Go to get the dogs and they just stayed in their kennels. Which was strange, but they had a big day herding. As I get down towards the fire I just get this chill through my body and start to feel unsettled. At this point I just beeline to the fire. As I'm about 5 meters from the fire I see a figure to my left but behind me by about 50 feet. At this point I think it's one of the dogs that has finally followed me. I turn to call it over and I get no response. I whistle some commands and still no response. It's just standing there. I'm shitting bricks at this point and move closer to the fire and grab a burning branch. I start to think I'm ducked. It's a wild dog, my wife will find me mauled. I decide to rush it and hopefully scare it off. I take 2 steps and this thing takes off like a bullet. The only noise is when it jumps the fence and hit the bush. I run back to the house to find the dogs all where I left them. The next day I go to check the fire with the dogs. Both of them refused to get out of the ute and even the cows wouldn't go near the area. I stopped walking after that and now I carry a knife with me when I go in that area of the farm. For a few years in my early 20s, I was living on the East Coast. My area ran right along the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I'd often go on short day hikes with a few friends along the marked paths in the afternoons when we were all free. A few times I'd gone alone, but I always kept to the same few areas and knew my way around well. On this particular day I'd waited a little later into the afternoon for my friends so we could go up the trails, but they ended up busy and I, feeling fat after a whole pizza for lunch with soda, decided to get in the car and go hike it off by myself to ease my guilty conscience. There's some particular trails I like to use. They shoot you straight up an incline to get your cardio in quick and hard, and then an adjoining, smaller path winds you back down around the other side of the face. About a third of the way down, there's trees to the right and a steepish hill on the left that drops down to a low spot where I could usually spot deer herds and fun stuff. I struggled going up that day, and I'd waited later than usual, so it was probably close to 7 o'clock to 7:10 p.m. by the time I reached the fork and turned back downhill. Mid-fall, this meant it was fairly dark by that time. As I'm walking, I notice a person in the valley. She had on a long, pinky white dress, and by the way she was changing positions and shuffling around, it looked like she was in the middle of a photo shoot. I couldn't see the photographer, and it was a little late for photos, but I figured the camera person was probably in the tree line and that they were likely finishing up after golden hour. I stopped to watch for a second, thinking how great a spot it was for some really awesome pictures. All of a sudden it was as if she fell. She didn't lower herself, there was no crouching or sitting motion, it was more like watching a glitch in real life. She was standing, and then she was face down on the ground with her legs bent up under her body. I got this really awful feeling all of a sudden, like shivers down my neck. Without taking my eyes off her, she started crawling on all fours right up the hill towards the trail I was on. She wasn't on her knees though, she was basically running on her hands and feet. Maybe I was just freaked out, but she was closing in far faster than it seemed like she should have been. It was almost like she'd been sped up, but the rest of the world was still moving by just the same. I wish I could say I'd pulled my phone out and gotten video evidence, or at least taken a picture, or been brave and kicked some spooky ass, but I was suddenly overcome with an intense feeling of danger and I fell/ran the rest of the way back to the parking lot without looking back even once. I peeled out of there and haven't gone back since. The weirdest part is that my car had been the only one in the lot when I got back to it, and that area isn't super accessible by any other park and hike type trailheads that I know of. I wrote it off as crazy drugs and nothing more, but I don't know. I told my friends, and a few of them went out later that night to investigate. Super duper smart idea, I know, but nobody has even seen anything like that out there since. Years ago, before we got married, my wife and I went to a local state park, with a picnic and a hammock. We set the hammock up in the woods, enjoyed our picnic, then fell asleep together in the hammock. I was abruptly awakened by my wife. She motioned for me to be quiet. The sun had set, there was still a hint of light in the sky, but we couldn't see anything meaningful in the woods. My wife beckoned me to listen. Complete silence. Then, the snap of a branch, in the distance. More silence. We were both suddenly very on edge. We whispered to one another, trying to figure out if someone was sneaking up on us. The silence was broken again, another branch, same direction but closer. Then, from another direction a momentary crunch of leaves. Now, we were terrified. We both had pocket knives on us, small but better than nothing. We also had a flashlight. We drew our knives and deliberated whether whatever was out there knew our location. We decided to keep the light off, lest we give away our exact location. Maybe we could run for the car? More steps, in rapid succession, coming directly toward us, then silence again. My wife had enough. "We know you duckers are out there," she yelled. Silence for an eternity, and then another crunch of leaves. We had enough. We prepared ourselves as best we could for a fight, then shined the flashlight into the darkness, toward the last noise we had heard. 3 deer scampered away, into the darkness. We sheepishly gathered our things and left without incident. Years ago, when I was in my late teens, me, my cousin and 4 friends went camping about 90 minutes north of where we lived in the Bay Area of CA. We went to a regular camping ground and set up for 3 days and nights of partying. We heard from a few campers who were somewhat locals of the area, living within 20 to 30 minutes drive, that there were local stories about a section of the woods that were supposed to be off limits due to paranormal activity. As soon as I heard that, I decided we had to go check it out. My cousin and one of our friends were willing to go. Our other 3 friends thought it was bull and stayed to get more drunk/stoned, so we set off on the second night. We got directions from a boyfriend/girlfriend on where to drive to, so we went at about 11 p.m. We arrived at 11:20 due to dirt roads and going slow to not pop a tire. After parking we got out on foot and walked for about the same amount of time, maybe a little longer into the woods single file down what seemed like a game trail. After about 30 minutes of walking we started to see a glow in the near distance. We kept walking, but more quietly. When we got to within about 300 yards we could see that it was a bonfire.
How long are stingers usually? A few seconds. Or actually like...
We started to get a bit spooked at this point, but like naive kids kept going.
How long is
As
my
soon as we got
stinger?
to within about 70 to 80
I
yards,
have
we
no
could pretty
idea.
much make out that we stumbled onto a ritual being held in the middle of the woods. We couldn't make out what the people were wearing or specifically doing, but they were visible in the firelight and there were about 12 to 15 of them around the main fire chanting and occasionally yelling.
Let me try
The
to
main
look
person,
at the
I
one
assume,
that
would
who
walk to the edge
pioned
of
it.
the circle of flames, disappear for a few seconds due to not being visible, Then come back to the main fire and do something which encouraged the rest to yell and chant. Well, out of stupidity and curiosity, we
If I
wanted
can
to see
find it.
exactly what
Where
they were
is it?
doing here in the middle of nowhere. We got a bit too close and we saw a person look in our direction, stare for a few seconds, and started to walk towards where we were not 50 t away. This sent us running as fast as we could while not trying to lose each other. The person
This one
yelled,
is
confirming it
2
was a he,
seconds,
and we
even though you
started to be
can't see
chased
shit.
by I don't know how
But
many
that's
of these
not by
people.
Pupyeon.
We could hear them charging into the forest and after us in our direction, and thank God we had that amount of a separation on them, or who knows. We got to my cousin's truck,
I have no idea
piled
where
in,
it
and
is.
took off as fast as we could for the
Oh,
first
is
couple
it this
1/4
one?
mile. Needless to say, we've never been back. I camp elsewhere. Okay, just know I absolutely love supernatural
Yeah,
stuff,
Pupyeon's one
which
is
is
2
partly
seconds
why I
as
like
well.
night hiking.
So maybe
But
2
after this
seconds is
experience, I'll stick to
pretty
just
good
reading stuff on the internet. So the original
pretty good
plan was we would go out in a group of 4
number.
people or so, but they all
Around
ended
1
up
to 2
canceling.
seconds.
I am a stubborn person and still am, so I stupidly decided to go alone. I know classic horror movie shit, so I got on the road and drove to the area I was planning on hiking, but it ended up being closed, so I decided to again go to a different one I've never been on. I'm a total idiot, y'all don't need to say it. So continuing that I started the hike listening to the one and only Panic at the Disco Dancing's Not a Crime when I heard someone. It sounded like one of the friends that was supposed to come, so I again idiotically thought they decided last minute to come. I could hear it calling my name and telling me to slow down. When it started getting closer, I turned off my music and listened closer. If it was coming towards me, it should sound clearer, which sent a chill down my spine. It honestly sounded distorted like a record player with someone's finger on it. I started getting real uncomfortable when I noticed it was coming from the way I was heading, not the way I came from. From what I remembered, there were no other cars. I started walking back to my car, which soon turned into a run. It continued to get louder, and the moment I saw my car, I booked it. I jumped in, and again, me being the ducking idiot I am, I decided to wait for it come out into the parking lot. I waited maybe 10 to 20 seconds when I was this tall-ass black figure. I'm really bad with scaling, but it was probably maybe 7 feet to 8 feet tall, which is not humanly possible, like hell nah. I duck and turn the car on and speed off.
Like
Got a
hell
speeding ticket
no.
later on, but like better than getting eaten by a ducking 7 foot tall witch ass weirdo. I honestly don't know if it was people messing with me or some sort of demon. If y'all know WTF that shit was like, comment on this, cause I'm still freaked the duck out and hate hiking alone and at night. This has a definite explanation, but still weird and scary. For a while, I was getting into nighttime photography, like taking landscape photos with the starry sky. There's a highway in Washington that leads to a really cool observatory of Mount St. Helens. So one November night, I drove out there at like 10 p.m. and walked around and took pictures till about 2 a.m. Leaving the observatory, you drive down this winding hill that eventually takes you back to the state highway. It's dark, I'm tired, and start driving down the hill. I found a corner and there's a bull elk standing in the middle of the road, staring at my car. I'm going slow enough so I stop with plenty of distance between myself and the elk. As it's staring at me, its family crosses the road behind it. So okay, he's just protecting his family from traffic. He makes his way to the shoulder of the road and appears to start walking away. I start driving again, but this time like really slow, because seeing him startled me, and now I'm tired and alert, and out in the woods. I pass the elk and bring my speed up to about 25, both hands on the wheel, brights on, window rolled down. All of a sudden this elk is side by side with my car, keeping pace and chasing me. It freaked me out, so I sped up a little bit and it still kept up. It chased me all the way down the hill, which seemed like a mile, but maybe a little shorter, and then he finally peeled off and disappeared. My best explanation is maybe my car was threatening to its family and so he had to be a tough guy and chase me away. But the initial panic of seeing him in my headlights, and then calming down, and then being blindsided by him chasing my car was enough to give me the jitters for my entire 2-hour drive home. While I was growing up, my family would visit the same lake every year for a week every summer. As we got older, we would visit a large rock we called the cliffs, and jump off. The rock was only 15 feet tall at the highest point, but the water was really deep. When we got older, we would jump in and try to touch the bottom, but we never could. When my brother and I were in our teens, we took kayaks out to the cliffs to jump on our own. We jumped off several times, and when we got too cold we took a break on the top of the cliffs to warm up in the sun. As we were sitting there, we noticed a white shape in the water, floating towards the surface. It was a letter, H. Eventually it sank back into the water and we lost sight of it. Before we could look away or say anything, another shape was floating upwards. It was the letter E. Eventually, it too sank below, but it was soon followed by 2 more letters, L and P. We didn't jump in after that. We stood up and left without saying a word. We never mentioned it to anyone, and I forgot it even happened after a while. Several years ago, I was working as a camp counselor and I told this story as a ghost story. I had forgotten about it, and I texted my brother to see if I hadn't just made it up completely. I asked him if he remembered the time we went to the jumping cliffs alone and saw something in the water. He replied yes, that he did remember. I asked him what it was, and his reply was, letters. They spelled help. Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either probably heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things. Namely skinwalkers. I have only seen one. Here is my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona that's sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation to the north and the U.S.'s largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school being so small, a 1A high school that has, on average, 80 students enrolled every year, always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo res. And we also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning, but this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of about 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus Big Blue. We were headed out and it wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving, before we had entered the res. By this time, everyone was asleep, with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the res's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and was now going about 85 miles per hour. I thought this was a little weird because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus staring out across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running towards the bus at an angle of pursuit, and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles per hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, holy crap. It's a skinwalker. The skinwalker ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus, hurtling sagebrush and rocks while staring at me. After I made eye contact with the thing, I could not look away. It was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me, this inhuman smile that went ear to ear, showing crooked, yellow, pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up and I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down onto all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform. Hair started appearing all over the skinwalker's body, and in about 3 seconds was now a coyote, and it ran off back into the desert out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear they would think I was crazy. I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He just came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like thing, turned around, got in his truck and drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact I moved away from that town and res, and, if I do have to go south, I go around, way around. When I first returned from the war, I was a power line rigger. This was on EHV lines, extra high voltage, the kind on the top of the steel towers. Those are transmission lines, not sub-transmission like most inner-city lines. So anyway, I had a job during a heavy windstorm, 2008, to go out and repair some lines near the Colorado and New Mexico border. Great pay since it was an emergency call-out, so I agreed. I meet up with my crewmen and head down, from Colorado Springs area. We get there around 9 p.m. and start getting to work. Windstorms are notorious for felling lines, but not EHV or UHV lines, since they are rigged different. When I crane up to see the broken link on the tower and inspect the damage, I remember seeing over the tops of most trees. I observed the view for a moment and saw some light nearby, from a campfire. As soon as I saw the light, I heard yelling coming from that area. It must have been about 200 to 300 yards away, but I heard a woman clearly yelling, and she kept saying, "Someone please help," over and over again. I crane down and start yelling for the other guys. They heard it too and were asking questions. I told them about the campfire lights coming from the direction our trucks were facing kinda. We jumped in one of the smaller trucks, since it was 4x4, and headed down the road. We looked everywhere for the light but didn't find anything. We drove back and forth and then back again and slowed down. We rolled the windows down and stopped the truck in about the area the light would be. We all heard moaning sounds coming from the right of our truck, so to the north. It sounded like 2 old people who are having heart attacks. And it was really loud. So now we're on edge. The site supervisor was calling the police now and giving the general area we were at. They told us to check to see if we see anything if we felt safe. Because I had that war veteran attitude, I decided to go take a look. 2 guys came with and our supervisor stayed with the truck to wait for police. Apparently they had a station not too far, so they said 10 to 15 minutes. I armed myself with a pickaxe, and
alright.
the other guys had conduit pipes.
You're
Like
awake?
rangers,
Well,
we all started
it's
walking
time for
through the
dinner,
trees with our
so
headlamps on, because it was really dark now. The moaning was still coming from ahead of us. We got through the trees and into a small clearing. Looked empty. The moaning stopped and we checked around. Nothing. We went back to the truck, and as soon as we got to it, we heard the woman
I
yell
only
again.
did one.
Same thing. Someone please help. It was just to the north where we just were.
And the
One
one
of the guys yelled
is
back,
this.
"Where are you?" and got no reply. Then we heard her scream in pain and nothing else. We were already running back north and the police were showing up. They must have seen us running north because 2 of them came after us. We
So?
stopped in the field area and they stopped
What do you
with
mean
us and
so?
asked us what was going on. We told them. They helped us look around and we saw nothing else. We walked back to the truck and didn't hear anything else. They said they would hang out with us for a bit. We got back to work on the line and got it fitted. The police stayed parked next to each
You
other.
forgot to
talking
make
on
the
the phone.
signature.
When I craned up, I couldn't see any campfire light or anything.
Save it as
We did the job. Took about an hour and
MOC.
a half and we were done.
And then if you
When
go
we were
to
packing our
the
tools to head out,
Nerd
one
or
of the
Die
cops left and
website,
the other
they
came
have
up to us.
MOC
He told us that just to
to
the west there was a
web
small airplane that crashed and the people
WebM.
burned to death.
I forgot what
He
the
said
file
when
is
the
called.
police and paramedics got to the scene, they were still on fire, but they were gone.
The
He told us
converter.
about how 2 bodies were found away from the plane like they were crawling away
If you
from it,
use that
and one body
converter
was
and you
stuck in
have
one of the windows.
transparency
Said
in
it
your
happened in the
MOC
70s
file,
or 80s.
it keeps the transparency.
We packed up fast and got the duck out of there fast.
Okay,
So in retrospect, I never saw
I
a fire.
am done
just
for
light on the
today.
trees
It's
from
dinner
one.
time. I'm
I
gonna
can't
go
tell you how
eat
creepy
the
that
dinner
shit was to
because my
find out
subway is
afterwards.
here.
The voices
Thank
and
you
moans were so clear. I
for
always kind of
hanging out. Yeah, I didn't do that much, but it's time for dinner. Thank you for joining the random stream. As always, tomorrow there will be a scheduled stream, and the day after that we're watching D&D Honor something thieves. Honor something thieves. Honor, I don't remember the movie name. I'm gonna go eat. Have good dinner, you guys. Goodbye.